Hello everybody, this is Yoko's Anime Reactions, and this should be part 6 and hopefully the end of volume 7 if I get lucky. If not, it'll be part 7, that'll be the end. Frida, a visit to the Noble's Quarter. Oh my, it's already time. I noticed while changing for bed that the color of one of the face stones on my bracelet was a little different. The bracelet had a bunch of tiny black face stones lined up along it, one of which was no longer opaque. As a devouring sufferer signed with the noble, my master had given me this magic tool to contain my overflowing mana. Face stones changing color was a sign that the bracelet was getting full with mana, which meant that I needed to go see Lord Heinrich, the noble I had signed with, and my master. Grandfather, please request a meeting with Lord Heinrich. The face stones had begun to change color. I informed Grandfather the next morning. We needed special permission to enter the Noble's Quarter, and as I was underage, I would need him to accompany me there. That time already, Yes, indeed. Shall I bring some pound cake as a gift? That would be wise. He seems to have quite liked it last time. Very well, then. I shall bring pound cake mixed with rum toff this time. We had invented a new form of pound cake last winter by thinly slicing the rum toff mine had taught us to make and mixing it into the cake batter. It took much trial and error to find the ideal amount of rum toff to add, but thanks to Lisa's efforts, the cake ended up quite delicious. It had a strong alcoholic smell, which made it fairly popular among male nobles. However, since the rum toff itself had been made experimentally, there wasn't enough for us to make too many pound cakes. Lace was determined to make much more rum toff over the coming summer, though. I believe it is about time for us to expand our repertoire, Grandfather said, sending a meaningful glance to the kitchen where Lace likely was. Both she and I were thinking the same thing. I will have to get a hold of mine again soon. That was easier said than done, however, given how thorough Benno was when it came to hiding her from the world. All of her guild paperwork was delivered by the Gilberta Company, and even the yearly financial report that needed to be delivered and discussed in spring was handled by Benno. Despite being a member of the Merchants Guild, mine showed up less often than any other foreman or forewoman, and yet she was selling enough that her workshop was quickly becoming one of the largest in the city. Plant paper, picture books, the toys she had made, and sold as winter handiwork. At first glance, the mine workshop's overall output was rather low, but everything they made was priced high and brought in significant profit, and that wasn't even including all the new products that the Gilberta Company had bought the rights to. The Gilberta Company keeps coming out with new products as well. It's easy to forget that they're supposed to be a store for clothing and accessories. The Rinsham hairpins and uniquely shaped hangers were close enough to their main business focus, but the plant paper, picture books, toys, and diptychs weren't related to clothing or accessories in the slightest. And mine is getting involved in more than just products, isn't she? Indeed. Many of the contracts that passed with the Merchants Guild with mine's name on them were significant. A contract with the Ink Guild, huge orders for the smith she was a patron of, as well as various carpenters, a joint investment with Benno for an eatery that was due to open soon. They all involved a lot of money moving around. And she joined the temple as an apprentice shrine maiden too. But just what in the world is she doing? It seems to me that she's trading at a much higher value than most other merchants. Even though our contract over the pound cake had ended, I had not heard from mine or even seen her in the guild for a long time. Does she not mind if I just continue monopolizing our pound cake? Because if she doesn't send me word soon, that's exactly what I intend to do. About 10 days after the first face stone had changed color, Lord Heinrich permitted us to meet him. I waited until fifth bell the day of then departed for the Noble's Quarter with Grandfather. It's time, Frida. Yes, Grandfather. See you soon, Mother. I got into a carriage and sat next to Grandfather before the door was shut behind me. The bracelet on my wrist shook as the carriage bounced, making it impossible to ignore. There certainly are quite a few stones that have changed color there. We must give it to Lord Heinrich at once so that he can empty it out again. Whenever we gave the bracelet to Lord Heinrich, he would empty it of mana and return it to me. That was our only business there, but the emptying process took enough time that we were always invited over for dinner. If only this were lunch, I would feel more at ease right now. The fact that he invites us to dinner is proof that we are being treated as proper guests. I know, we cannot refuse. Being invited over for dinner, of course, meant that the gates would be closed by the time we were due to come back, which meant spending the night in Lord Heinrich's mansion. And staying the night meant bathing. Bathing has been easier on me ever since I took mine's advice and started spending less time in the hot water, but I still dislike noble baths. That is something you will have to grow out of, Grandfather said with a short laugh. He always made me bathe for a really long time, during which he would have business discussions with Lord Heinrich's head attendant. I puffed out my cheeks in a small pout. You know that I prefer business over bathing too, and yet I bathe anyway. I am more than mature enough already. Our carriage took a right turn after reaching the temple at the end of the main street. Towering white walls made of the same material as the temple stretched on into the distance. They separated the lower city from the nobles' quarter, and following it for a bit would lead to a gate. What we know as the nobles' quarter today was actually the whole city hundreds of years ago, right? I learned about that the other day. That's correct. It's said that the city expanded when the first Iron Fist took control of the duchy from the previous line of archdukes. It was standard practice that when nobles from one duchy invaded another, and its archduke couldn't protect its city from them, the new archduke would become whichever noble had the most mana. The new archduke would then use their more sizable power to expand the city. The previous city was rebuilt as the nobles' quarter, and then a lower city for commoners was built on the southern side, correct? Yes. Furthermore, what used to be an inn that served as a front gate to investigate travelers was repurposed as the temple. I heard that nobles still use the so-called Nobles' Gate within the temple, but that has nothing to do with either of us. We commoners entered the nobles' quarter using a small gate on the north side in a town that has been used for guards, according to Grandfather. The north gate was guarded by several commoner soldiers and lay noble knights. We paid the entry fee, then gave several products to the knights as gifts. We were then asked why we were entering the nobles' quarter, where we were going, and whether we had the proper authorization. The knights obviously looked down on us for being commoners. Looking that made me uncomfortable, but I couldn't let that get to me. Otherwise, I would never survive when I moved here in the future. It hadn't taken me long to get used to returning even their scornful gazes with a smile. Well, check out. Go into that carriage over there. Understood. Lower city carriages were dirty enough that we had to switch to a noble carriage before passing through the north gate. Once that was done, we were traveling smoothly down the road between the pristine white buildings of the nobles' quarter without any bouncing or shaking at all. If only we could have carriages like these in the lower city. That wouldn't be an easy feat. My understanding is that they use magic tools to dampen the shaking, which is very nice to hear. As a lay noble, Lord Heinrich's estate was comparatively close to the north gate. Land closer to the gates, being cheaper, seemed to be the same in both the lower city and the nobles' quarter. We are glad to see you, Miss Frida. The head attendant welcomed us in and led us to a guest parlor. It resembled the parlor in our home, but that was only because Grandfather had specifically modeled our home after Lord Heinrich's. There were still significant differences between the two, though, given that they used enough magic tools like they were second nature here. Apologies for the wait. Lord Heinrich arrived shortly after. He was 17 when he sided with us, which made him around 20 now, and he was as kind and as honest of a noble as his appearance would suggest. So, she's been signed with him for 3 years? She had her baptism when she met mine, and that was like a year. No, that wasn't a year. It was a little over a year ago. So she's, 8 now? So she was 5 when she signed the contract with Lord Heinrich. Okay. So when she comes of age, he'll be 27 and she'll be, 15? Not too big of a difference. His father had died 2 years ago, and it seemed he was working hard to serve as the head of his family despite his young age. Lord Heinrich had a first wife with whom he had children, but no second wife, and as a commoner, I would be counted as a mistress rather than a proper wife. It would be fair to say that he was somewhat relying on my family for financial support. But ironically, the source of his money problems was the diligent and warm-hearted nature of his family, which was why Grandfather had arranged for me to sign with him in the first place. He wouldn't abuse his authority to drain money from us, nor was he likely to be involved in any back-alley deals. There was no noble more ideal for me to sign with. May this meeting ordained by the gods be blessed on this fruitful day given life by Flutrain, the goddess of water's healing. It's good to see you after so long, Lord Heinrich. Grandfather and Lord Heinrich exchanged the lengthy greetings of the nobility, which was especially tricky to learn since the gods one needed to name changed each season, and while listening, I suddenly remembered the picture book I had bought for mine. Oh, I recall that she wanted to make picture books for all the subordinate gods as well. I wonder if she ever finished those. Mine had been making picture books that could easily have their cover swapped out. They were black and white, but the illustrations were still beautiful, and the gods were described in simple and clear language. I intended to give the books leather covers once I had a full set. Frida, your hand, Lord Heinrich said, bringing me back to reality. I extended my left hand so that he could see the bracelet. He struck it lightly with the shining stick he took out of seemingly thin air. Oh, so he is a true noble. Okay, so Lord Heinrich is a knight too. Or not a knight, he graduated from the Royal Academy, I mean. What am I saying? The Knight's Order and the Royal Academy graduates aren't all the same. He took out a seemingly thin air, then murmured a quiet word that made the bracelet grow in size to the point that it could finally be removed. Yes, quite a few face stones have changed colors. Are you feeling all right? Lord Heinrich asked worriedly after taking a look at the removed bracelet. He never acted arrogantly or like he was superior to me, even though I was a commoner who had signed my life away to him. So my impression of him was a very positive one. I'm feeling fine, thank you. I appreciate the concern. Glad to hear it. May we meet again at dinner. Indeed. Lord Heinrich left with the bracelet, at which point his head attendant came in and began discussing business with grandfather. Female attendants would soon call me to take a bath before dinner so that I could dress properly for the meal. The most difficult part of coming to the mansion would soon begin. After finishing a long and exhausting bath, I sat at the dinner table where most of the topics discussed were concerning the circumstances in the lower city. I effortlessly partook in discussions of market trends and my own education, then talked about the new flavors of pound cake that Lace had been speedily developing. My younger brother, who just came of age and recently left home, is quite fond of your pound cake. I myself am not too fond of overly sweet food, but this pound cake has a strong scent of alcohol, and the more restrained sweetness makes it easier to eat. It seemed that Lord Heinrich's younger brother liked sweets more than him. I know who that is, and we're soon going to find out who. That little brother in question had been given guard duty at some point during last fall, but committed some grave error that had resulted in a hefty fine. Grandfather and I had paid the fine on his behalf, but we had no idea what he was really like. I had not met him yet. Master Heinrich, do you have a moment? A servant with a pale, anxious expression whispered something in Lord Heinrich's ear, and he immediately stood up. My apologies, Frida. There is emergency elsewhere. I must take my leave for today. Lord Heinrich left the dining hall with the servant at once. As pressing for details would be uncouth and unwise, Grandfather instead passed the time by harmlessly discussing the food served. Well then, Grandfather, good night. Yes, sleep well. A male attendant escorted Grandfather to his guest room, while a female attendant took me to mine. It was the same room I always used, even when changing for the bath. Here you are, Miss Frida. Oh? My things had been brought here when I went for my bath, but now they were nowhere to be seen. I tilted my head slightly as I walked to the bed as the attendant's guidance, where she pulled the bed curtains to the side. If you would like, you can... The attendant let out a squeal. There was a man lying down on the bed I was to use. He looked much like Lord Heinrich, and his brows were tightly knitted as he groaned in pain. Sir Daniel. Sir Daniel is Heinrich's younger brother, and that means that Frida and her grandfather paid for the part of Mine's robes. So she has no clue of this. And I didn't even know this until I watched the anime and saw this. I was like, whoa. That was a twist. Sir Daniel, Miss Frida, my apologies. I shall ask the head attendant about this. The attendant, looking positively baffled, spun around and exited the room. Given that my things had been moved out, I could imagine that I had been given a separate room that nobody had been notified of properly. Goodness, what should I do? Unable to leave the room on my own to chase after the attendant, but feeling too awkward to just stand alone in a room with a man I didn't know, despite the fact that he was unconscious, I put a hand on my cheek and sighed. My sincerest apologies, Miss Frida. The head attendant hurriedly walked into the room. It seemed that while Lord Daniel's younger brother now lived in the Knight's Dorm, he had been badly injured on duty and taken to his home until a late healer was available, since it was so close to the Noble's Gate. But as he was unconscious and there was no time to prepare a room, he had been brought here instead. We have prepared another room for you, Miss Frida, but it seems we were so surprised that we didn't send word as we should have. My sincerest apologies. I can sympathize with how unsettling it must have been for your master's younger brother to be brought here unconscious without warning. If the other room is ready, I do not mind moving there now. Just as the servant let out a sigh of relief at my understanding, a ball of light flew into the room through the window and spun circles above Daniel, sprinkling a glimmering dust onto him. The falling light shining in the dark room looked brilliant and mystical. So this is magic, isn't it? How beautiful. I reached out to touch the dust, but it avoided my hand as if on purpose. Oh, Frida. Yeah, that was Mine's blessing, and the fact that it didn't hit her is sad. So freaking sad. I was hoping that those two would become friends, but nope. Nope, apparently not, according to Mine. After a minute of me watching the dust up enraptured, Daniel suddenly shot up in bed. Apprentice, are you okay? Eek! Daniel was gripping a shining wand in his hand and scanning the room with a hard expression as though he was in the middle of combat. But after a second, he blinked in surprise. "Where am I?" he said in confusion. He must have become disoriented when he was knocked unconscious. As Daniel looked around the room again, baffled, the head attendant took a step forward. "Sir Daniel, how are you feeling? You were brought home after falling unconscious, and up until now you've been resting in bed. I'm fine. Judging by the remnants of light, there must have been some healing magic." Daniel looked down at his arm, then shot his head back up. There was an intense look on his face. "I have to hurry back to the Knight's Order. Sir Daniel, I think it would be wise to wait, and there's no time." Despite having been groaning unconscious just moments ago, Daniel sprang up from the bed with that ease, raced to the balcony, and flung the window open. "I'm in the middle of guard duty. If the apprentice shrine maiden is hurt again, I'll—" He swung his arm, and that alone was enough for a large winged horse of pure white to appear by the balcony. He mounted his horse, his expression worryingly grim, and then flew off. It was dark out, but the horse's large wings were such a radiant white that I could see them flapping through the air as Daniel quickly disappeared from sight. The ball of light appearing in the room and Daniel jumping out of bed had happened so suddenly that all I and the head attendant could do was stand in shock and watch him go. "Miss Frida, I will guide you to your room." "Yes, please do." After helplessly watching Daniel go, the head attendant came back to his senses and guided me to my newly prepared room. I climbed into bed and thought back to what I had heard Daniel say. He had certainly yelled about needing to help an apprentice shrine maiden who was in danger. To my understanding, mine was the only apprentice shrine maiden in the temple at the time. If Sir Daniel had been badly injured while on guard duty, it was very likely that mine had gotten wrapped up in whatever was going on as well. What in the world has happened? I could have asked Lord Heinrich, but nobles did not give away information so freely. He might tell me if I explained that I was mine's friend, but depending on what mess mine was wrapped up in, that opened up the possibility of putting myself in danger, too. It would likely be safer to keep my relationship with mine a secret. Yeah, probably best. I would at least like to make sure she's alive. At breakfast that morning, Lord Heinrich apologized for the incident the night before. "I was so concerned about my younger brother that I didn't send proper word out about it. My apologies." "Think nothing of it. I myself got to witness the magic of the nobility for the first time. It was beautiful, mystifying, and very worth seeing." After breakfast, Lord Heinrich returned my bracelet. All of its face stones were now black again. Shortly after, Grandfather and I returned home. "Grandfather, there's something I need to research. Please lend me the key to the inner document room." I hurried and changed before going to the Merchant's Guild. There existed a room that compiled documents related to magic contracts, and this room could only be entered by the Guildmaster and those who had his permission. I went there to search for copies of the contracts that mine had signed with Benno. Unlike those in the documents room that could be browsed by anyone, the contracts here would change when someone who had signed them died. Ooh. Yeah. Magic contracts were used rarely enough that it didn't take me long to find the documents concerning mine. Rosemine? A document I found said the contract had been signed by Benno Lutz and Rosemine. There would be no need to change the name of a devouring child who had signed a submission contract. So this was almost objective proof that mine had been taken by nobles. She had no doubt been adopted by one in the same way that others had offered to adopt me in the past. A noble had learned of mine's knowledge, seen the value in it, and made it his. It was hard to imagine the impact of such a move would be felt only in Ehrenfest. I gripped the documents and raced to Grandfather's office. "Something important has happened. Look at this." I showed Grandfather the magic contract of mine's name changed to Rosemine. His eyes widened. "Mine signed with the noble? It isn't unheard of for a devouring girl to be adopted, but mine? Mine had actively refused to sign with nobles, wanting to live with her family for as long as possible. She had said that she would choose death over being separated from them, yet now she had let herself be adopted by a noble? I myself didn't want to be a noble. I wanted to be a merchant. I wanted to spend my time doing business and counting money. When I told Grandfather that, he had found the ideal noble for me and signed me with him. Thanks to that, I would have a store in the noble's quarter when I came of age, and until then, I could live at home with family. I was satisfied with my choice. But what about mine? Grandfather, please call Benno over. I am sure he knows something about this. Ah, boy. Sylvester, cleaning up the mess. We will take our leave then. Please take care of yourself, my lady. Farewell. I just convicted my mother, then ripped apart another family with my own 2 hands. I can honestly do with some reassurance here. Someone lavished me with compliments. If I didn't have people assuring me that what I was doing was the right thing, serving as Archduke would be way too much for me, I thought, looking at the 2 parents kneeling in front of their own daughter. Thank you for coming today. I pray from the bottom of my heart that we meet again one day. Rosemine, while still standing, bent forward and lowered her head deeply as she said goodbye to those who used to be her family. It wasn't a gesture I recognized. When showing gratitude to the gods, one would get on both knees and lay prostrate. I had never seen someone lower just their head while still standing. This was indeed a girl who held memories of living in another world. Oh, I guess, Ferdinand had to tell him what he found, but still. Still, even though I didn't recognize the gesture, I could feel the emotions it expressed, whether I liked it or not. Anyone could tell that she was showing her gratitude for her family. I know what I had done. I knew I had ripped a loving family apart, so seeing their heartfelt goodbye sent a sharp pain through my chest. The door closed, and Rosamund was left standing alone, wavering unsteadily. I lowered my eyes in discomfort at the same time that Ferdinand abruptly stood up beside me. He quickly walked over to her, as if having predicted this, and embraced her just as she fell to the side. And she's out. I'm surprised she didn't pass out sooner, to be honest. Then he sharply shouted toward the door, "Fran, inside." A grey priest who had been waiting outside promptly rushed in. I recognized him as Rosamund's attendant, who had been so badly wounded by Bonna that just moving had made him twitch in pain. "Sister mine." I could see remnants of the blessing dusting his figure as he rushed over to her. Given that his wounds were gone, I could guess that Fran had received the same blessing mine's father had. The panic on his face showed just how much he cared about her. Even her attendant being blessed begged the question of just how far the lights of her blessing had gone. As I had just seen myself, Rosamund didn't hesitate to recklessly wield an enormous amount of mana when those she cared about were involved. I would have to investigate and see just how many people her blessing had reached. "It is nothing to worry about. She has simply used too much mana," Ferdinand said, grabbing a nearby potion from his well-stocked cabinet and pouring some into Rosamund's mouth. That was probably the terrible, foul-tasting one. Even Sylvester knows this. It was as effective as it was vile, but if you ask me, it was downright cruel to pour any of that junk into the mouth of an unconscious child. Ferdinand was once again proving to act more on logic than emotion. Poor girl. "Fran, take her to her room and get her in bed. I will come by tomorrow afternoon to explain what the future holds. Gather all of her attendants for me when the time comes." Understood. Fran picked up the limp unconscious Rosamund and left the room. That somehow reminded me of something I had seen before. "Arnold, some tea. That will be all." "That as you wish." I eyed Ferdinand, who was giving an order to his trusted yet forgettable attendant, while murmuring to Karlstedt in a low voice. "Hey, Karlstedt, is it just me, or is Rosamund like the spitting image of Blow? Who the heck is that? Seriously? Blow? Ah, the Shamil you once kept as a pet." Shoemills? Oh, Shoemills! Like a groundhog or something? I can't remember. Shoemills were easily domesticated babies that made cute pooey noises. Oh, that explains why Sylvester had her do that. She reminded him of that. Okay, that explains it. It's still annoying, but it makes sense. Plenty of nobles kept them as pets, myself included, but Blau was about the weakest creature I had even seen. She had fur that was a color between black and blue, big round... That explains it even more. She even looked like it, like a human version. Good God, Sylvester, seriously, you couldn't have mentioned that? Maybe then she would have understood why you poked her cheek like that. Big round golden eyes was always very weak and seemed to like Karlstedt more than me. In other words, she was exactly like Rosamund in animal form. That's what I just said. I sought Karlstedt's agreement, but he just let out an awkward grunt. "You say she liked me more than you, but that's entirely your fault. She was constantly on the verge of death from all your teasing. You could say she only grew attached to me as a desperate measure to stay alive. Hey, it sounds real bad when you put it like that. All I did was give her the love a pet needed. You were even less delicate and considerate as a kid than you are now. With the way you chased it around and crushed it with hugs. Oh, I feel bad for how do you say it? Blay, whatever you call it. I feel sorry for his pet. That's right, I was taking a drink of my drink. Any small animal would have been at risk of an early death, Karlstedt sighed, rubbing his temples. Well, what? Blow getting tired so quickly back when we used to play together was because of me, not because she was weak? Huh? Learn to control yourself better this time. If I understand Ferdinand's reports correctly, Rosamund is a lot weaker than that Shoemill. Wow. Yeah, weaker than Blow? I'll believe it when I see it. Seriously, I'm blown away here. I thought Blue ran away from me because, as a Fae beast, she understood my true might. Or really she was just scared for her life. I can't believe it. I'm sure Rosemine's already forgiven me for all that teasing. I just saved her life after all. You were messing with her as hard as you could to see how much patience she had with strangers, right? Well, she wasn't amused by that. And you just ripped her apart from her family, remember? I held my tongue, having noticed Ferdinand's attendant pushing a serving cart carrying drinks this way. The cups made a light clink as he lined them up on the table, and I shook my head in disappointment. I've never seen a more boring guy in my life. All of Ferdinand's attendants were men, and probably thanks to how strict he trained them, they always blandly did their work in the most efficient way possible. They were skilled at their jobs, but there was nothing fun or interesting about them at all. Ferdinand, how about you get a shrine maiden as an attendant for a change? I have no need for women attempting to seduce me for status, and a single woman will be out of place and make it harder for everyone else to work. Ferdinand immediately shut my idea down, pretty much saying that he didn't need a spark in his life at all. Arno, clear the room. Don't let anyone near. As you wish. The arrival of the outsider noble, the imprisonment of the High Bishop, and Rosemine's name change and adoption had all happened so abruptly we would need time to discuss things before he informed her attendants and the other priests. Once the presence of people outside the door faded, Ferdinand let out a slow sigh. And so our plan worked. We've accomplished our goals. Yep. We'd secured mine, who had refused to sign with the noble, and tried running away for as long as she possibly could, secured just cause to execute the High Bishop, who had been breaking the law to increasingly visible ways, put Mother, who was protecting the High Bishop, under house arrest, and taken into custody a noble with connections to the High Bishop, which would serve as a powerful trump card against the Archduke of Ehrenbach. What, are you and Ehrenbach not on good terms or something? All in all, the events of today would no doubt serve to quiet the faction of nobles supporting Mother over me. Not too shabby. I've got a real bad taste in my mouth, though. If you ignored how awful it felt to purposely lead my mother into a trap and then rip apart a happy family, then sure, today was a pretty good day. Don't be so hard on yourself, Sylvester. This was the best possible outcome. The end doesn't always justify the means, you know. Whenever something happened that led to me getting called black-hearted or cold and calculating, you can bet that Ferdinand's plots were to blame, most of the time anyway. I have no love for Besenwast or either Mother, Ferdinand said, wrinkling his nose dismissively. They were family to me, but to Ferdinand they were just obstacles. I know that, but it's still hard to hear him say it to my face. What about Rosemine, then? You don't feel anything about erasing mine from existence and turning her into Rosemine? I think this is the fastest and most efficient means of giving her a brighter future. So he said, but his expression was a little more concerned than it had been a moment ago. The warmth and love in mine's family was unthinkable among nobles who prioritized glory and the continuation of their house above all else. Even Ferdinand felt some guilt over ripping apart a family that sincerely cared for each other. She will be emotionally unstable for some time, I believe, Ferdinand said with a troubled grimace. He had said that even just staying in the temple over the winter had led to her being so unstable that he could see her mana stirring, which meant he had to keep his eyes on her at almost all times. It was rare for the emotionally distant Ferdinand to be so considerate of others. Maybe having Rosemine around would be good for the man obsessed with results over everything else. I'll leave comforting Rosemine in those trying times to you two. I can't get involved here. Sylvester, I am of Ehrenfest. Just as I do not spoil my true son, I cannot spoil my adopted daughter. Spoiling Rosemine would just make me want to start spoiling my own son, who will one day have to bear the heavy burden I carry now. But I'm told that I mustn't pamper the future Archduke so often that it's exhausting. Unlike Ferdinand, I'm not so great at cutting off my feelings and acting rationally. There's so much I can't do thanks to this position of Archduke binding me. Clumsy as ever, I see, Karstedt said with a wry smile. It would have been better for a cold and calculating man like Ferdinand to be the Archduke. Yet another day where I cursed that Ferdinand was born to a mistress instead of the first wife. More importantly, though, is Rosemine all right? She called on the Father, Mother, and Eternal Five all at once. That'd be enough to knock out even a healthy person. Are we sure she's not dead? Karstedt said, glancing at the door. I crossed my arms and followed his gaze. One didn't normally pray to multiple gods at once. It required more mana, and the chance of success dropped hard. Especially since the god of life was disliked by his brothers and sisters for hiding the goddess of earth every year. I hadn't heard of a single case where a prayer to all of the gods at once had actually worked, let alone one where multiple people received the blessing. That prayer actually working is what's weirding me out. I thought for sure it was going to fail, I said. and Karstad, who would now be considered Rosemine's biological father, looked up at the ceiling with a frown. That was unprecedented, but I don't think Rosemine fully understands what she did, nor how significant it is. Indeed, not at all, Ferdinand agreed. You got hit with the blessing yourself, didn't you, Ferdinand? Did you teach her to use magic? While the lights of blessings had avoided Karstad and I... Wait, they avoided Karstad and Sylvester. They did? I could have sworn that it hit all three of them. They did reach Ferdinand. They had probably gotten close enough to justify that, but missing a blessing that significant kind of ticked me off. I glared at Ferdinand since I was her adopted father and therefore deserved it more than him, but he just glared back at me. You have been annoying mine for quite a while, ever since you showed up, but Ferdinand has been nothing but helpful to her. Helping her out, helping her with the problems, even giving her the chance to see her own memories again. She's very trusting and grateful to him, unlike you, dude. Not that she doesn't trust him or anything, but still, Ferdinand has more credit to his name than he does. For her. Enough already. How many times have I said this now? Mine could use magic from the start. The Tromba extermination mission had been Mine's first ever ritual, and to help her, Ferdinand had given her a magic tool in the form of a ring that amplified and strengthened her mana. That much I understood, but apparently Mine had suddenly blessed the entire Knight's Order with a prayer to Angrif, the god of war. She herself had said that seeing the Tromba scared her, and that she just wanted to pray for their good luck in battle. The reports were clear, but they just didn't make sense. She said she just made up a line that sounded like something a noble would say, and was surprised when it turned into a blessing. But I was more surprised than anyone when it happened, Ferdinand continued. I have not taught her how to use magic whatsoever. She seemed pretty experienced to me. To think that was a blessing she gave by accident, Karstad said while rubbing his chin, having received that blessing himself. To be frank, it was completely insane that she had managed to compress her overflowing mana on her own, without teaching or assistance, and it was insane that she had prayed for their good fortune, and given a divine blessing without meaning to. It's hard to believe she didn't mean for it to be a blessing, but even putting that aside, how was she so good at using her mana at that young of an age? I believe it is because she has the mind of an adult, and a high capacity for learning. The mind of a child cannot control mana properly, but despite her youthful body, Mine has memories of reaching adulthood in another world. That must have been enough for her to control it, Ferdinand proposed. She grew used to the flow of mana while making her offerings to the divine instruments as an apprentice Blue Shrine Maiden, and although it was by chance she gave a blessing by stating the name of a god, that was enough for her to know that she could control her mana freely if she had a face stone. And furthermore, she saw knights giving their weapons a darkness blessing before proceeding to pray with the divine instrument to grant a sizable blessing of her own. It was then that she learned how to give blessings by praying to the gods. Still, learning to pray is one thing, but how do you explain her just blasting out the whole prayer like that? The prayers necessary for earning the blessings of the gods were unbearably long. You had to memorize their names and which god gave which blessing. Apprentice knights were taught to pray to the god of darkness early, so that they could bless their weapons for Tromba missions, but most struggled to do even that. If you were to ask Mine, she would say that only needed to memorize the lines for a single prayer. From there, she just needed to mix in the names of gods and lines of scriptures, both of which she had learned from reading the Bible. Thinking back to the spring prayer ambush, Mine had absolutely said, I just wanted to pray to the gods to make magic happen. I just have to pray to gods to make magic happen, right? Without even realizing how blunt that was. She wasn't wrong, but nobody educated in the Royal Academy will waste mana like that. Starting today, Rosemine will be a noble girl who used magic tools in her day-to-day life. I get the feeling that it'll be smart to teach her a little about magic before she enters the Royal Academy, I said. Magic tools were an essential part of noble life. Most kids would be fine just carrying around a tool that could absorb their excess mana. But since nobody could predict what messes Rosemine might end up in, we'd intended to give her face stones that could expel mana too. Sylvester's right. It's more dangerous to keep using self-taught magic. Who knows what she might see, and draw wrong inspiration from, Karstad added, nodding in agreement. Ferdinand furrowed his brow and began tapping his temple. That was his thinking pose. Something I was all too familiar with, and a sign that he was in the middle of constructing a brutal education plan that he would enforce on Rosemine without a shred of mercy. Sucks for her. Yeah, it does, I imagine. Because I imagine that he is just as ruthless as a teacher as he is a fighter. Right, Ferdinand. Give Rosemine a physical examination. You mentioned that there was something suspicious about her poor health, right? If she has a problem with her mana flow, I trust you can make a potion for it. Given that she was now my adopted daughter, there would be a huge fuss if a doctor found something wrong with her. If she was sick with something particularly rare, I'd have to fend off weirdos wanting to use her for research. Giving her a checkup now and keeping it private before moving her to the Noble's Quarter would be best. I do feel that when it comes to Rosamond, nothing can ever be simple. I will do as you suggest, Sylvester, and examine her here in the temple. It seemed that not even the Ferdinand can make predictions when Rosamond was involved. He never would have believed that she had the mind of someone from another world without that magic tool. There'd be a lot to gain if we used her knowledge properly, but the more about her we kept a secret, the better. Oh yeah, and get this, too. Get this to Benno from the Gilberta Company. What is it? An introduction to Rosamond and our future plans. If all three of us firmly said that Rosamond was Karstad's daughter who had been raised in the temple for safety's sake, we would be able to strong-arm Noble Society and the temple into believing it, but none of us knew the Lower City well enough to know how well known she was down there. Lower City matters are best left to those in the temple. Benno seems like a competent tool. With those instructions, he should take care of things just fine for us. Wow, calling Benno a tool. Ferdinand took the document with a dubious expression since I usually dump my instructions on him instead of anyone else. He skimmed those documents and his eyes shot wide open. Sylvester, I can understand getting him up to speed, but what does this matter about a dinner meeting at the Italian restaurant? Here comes the annoying lecture. Look at Mr. Logic Man, all serious and stubborn, and as flexible as a stone wall. Why did we let him grow up to be like this? He acts so old and mature because he doesn't appreciate fun in the slightest. Are you listening, Sylvester? Look, think about it. We've got a lot to talk to Benno about, don't we? Like all that stuff about spreading the printing business, I said, which also earned me a raised eyebrow from Karstad. Just summon him here. What need is there for the Archduke himself to visit the Lower City? Oh, there's a big need, and that need is located in my stomach. I'm going to eat that food no matter what. Oh boy, I guess the way to his heart is through his stomach. At least think of a good excuse. Don't become an Archduke, kids. You can't even walk through your own city without needing 1,000 layers of excuses and elaborate plan. It's a pain, but I probably should think of a good reason for this. Wow, breaking the fourth wall. I dug a pinky around in my ear as I thought of an excuse. Well, how about I say that a merchant from the Lower City can't do proper business with a bunch of stuffy scholar officials surrounding him? I wouldn't be able to hear the actual opinions of an already successful merchant, so we wouldn't be able to come to a mutually agreeable conclusion, and the discussion would essentially just end with me giving him an order. It was hard for a commoner to answer questions honestly when surrounded by scholar officials, which in turn meant that it would be nigh impossible for me to get the honest opinion I wanted. I've already talked to Benno about this printing business. At the very least, this won't be coming out of nowhere for the Gilberta Company. Seeing Benno while touring the orphanage had come as a complete surprise for me. I hadn't expected anyone there to know that I was the Archduke. I asked for his opinions as a merchant while making sure he kept quiet, and in the process learned that Ferdinand and I weren't the only ones who knew that the printing business would change history. Benno thought the same. There would always be enormous resistance to rapid change, but this rapid change was happening due to Mine's otherworldly knowledge. I had asked Benno a simple question. If, worst case scenario, I were to kill Mine, would that stop the change from happening? Benno had slowly shaken his head in response. No, it's too late for that. Plant paper that can be mass-produced is already on the market, and now that we've taught the Ink Guild how to make ink suitable for printing, their workshops are starting to mass-produce that as well. There's also the fact that the Smithing Guild has seen a demonstration of the metal letter types needed for printing. And finally, while it is still a prototype, a printing press has been completed. All the pieces are in place and we're spreading outside the city. There's even an apprentice merchant who knows everything about bookmaking and who says that his dream is to sell books throughout the country. Even if Mine were to die now, the ripple she has made has turned into an unstoppable wave. That was precisely why he had hidden Mine's existence and carefully selected which of her inventions to sell. This wave will spread even faster with Mine alive. It's astounding how dedicated to making books she is. It would only be a matter of time before printing spread throughout the world. I may have been the Archduke of Ehrenfest, but not even I could easily crush the Plant Paper Guild, the Mine Workshop, the Ink Guild Workshops, the Smithies, and the Ink Guild, all while simultaneously wiping out everything they knew about printing. If stopping the wave wasn't possible, then my only choice was to ride it and use it to benefit the duchy as much as possible. I've already told the Gilberta Company that Ehrenfest will sanction the printing business with mine at its center, and to prepare for its acceleration once she becomes a noble. The first step of our plan is to make another workshop in the orphanage of a nearby town. I would need to send the Gilberta Company and a scholar there to see how big of a workshop can be made, how many workers they would need, and what tools they would require. In any case, Rosemont can only return to the outside world once her baptism ceremony and inauguration as the High Bishop are over. We have some time. Tell them to ensure that the workshop investigation and Italian restaurant are finished before then. And there we go. Is that a good enough excuse for you? I asked. Looking at Ferdinand, his brow furrowed harder and his expression twisted into a grimace. Can't you use that talent of yours for anything but food and other pleasures? Hey, pal, I'm always going all out, whether it's for pleasure or not. I put as much effort in as I could when it came to sneaking away from work underneath Ferdinand's nose, or plotting about how to delegate all my work to others so that I could relax. I'm offended that he'd think I only go all out for food and stuff. Our conversation was interrupted by the chime of 7th bell. It seemed our discussion had continued for a fairly long time. I stood up and so did Ferdinand and Karlstadt. That's all for today. We can discuss the baptism ceremony's details when the Archduke conference is over. I need to get back to the sovereignty. Karlstadt and I had snuck out of a dinner party celebrating the beginning of the conference, and would need to have returned before tomorrow morning when the conference itself would begin. Could I ask you to take the Vice Commander of the Knight's Order as your guard? Karlstadt asked, his tone formal and respectful. I would like to stay here and prepare for Rosamond's baptism ceremony if possible. Sure. Later, Ferdinand, Karlstadt, get that physical examination done, and once Karlstadt has everything ready, move her to the noble's quarter. Those in the temple will need to prepare for receiving Rosamond as the new High Bishop in the meantime. Ferdinand, I trust you with explaining the circumstances to Benno and preparing the temple for the upcoming changes. Karlstadt, I entrust you with preparing the baptism and enforcing the punishment of the criminals we imprisoned today. Having received my orders, they both knelt out of respect. Oh, God, no. Not this one. I really, really do not want to even read this one, to be honest. Arno, Fran, and I. It was yesterday that an outsider noble had entered the temple, causing a stir, drawn the attention of the Archduke, and then been sent away to prison with the High Bishop. The High Priest had sent all of his attendants out of the room, including me, his head attendant, and thus I spent the night not knowing the details of the situation at all. Arno, tell mine's attendants to take this to the Gilberta Company. This is top priority, the High Priest said. As you wish. It was after breakfast and right around second bell, that the High Priest gave me a letter of invitation to deliver. From the way he looked, and the fact that he had prepared a letter like this so early in the morning, I could tell that he spent all night working without sleeping much at all. If anyone else asks about what happened last night, tell them I'll give an explanation to everyone some other day, he said before leaving his room. Yesterday, Fran had come on urgent business while the High Priest was in his workshop. The High Priest had told me to inform visitors that he was absent, and while it would have been easy for me to contact him from outside, I instead chose to ignore Fran, which led to quite the fuss in the hallway. In the end, he thought I was just being inflexible. I wonder what face he would make if he knew I ignored his needs on purpose. Jerk. Actually, he's more of a jerk than that, so yeah. Good morning, Fran. I had found Fran and Gil drawing water from the well. Mine's chambers must have been really lacking in personnel if her head attendant was doing such menial chores. Delia's absence was putting quite a strain on him, and I couldn't help but leak a faint smile at that fact. Bigger jerk. Fran looked at me with surprise after pouring the water he had drawn into Gil's bucket. He had a tall and muscular body that would have disappointed Sister Mine to no end, but when he widened his eyes like that, it was easy to remember what a frail little boy he had been while serving her. Oh, God. I'm assuming her is the person I'm thinking of and not mine. Oh, God. Spoilers to anyone who does not know this or has not read this part of the light novel. We are going to probably get mentions of... I don't know if we're going to get mentions of this, but there's going to be hints that there was sexual abuse in the temple. Yeah. Just as a spoiler warning. Or not really a spoiler warning, a trigger warning, I should say. So, yeah. Good morning, Arno. What brings you here this early? An errand from the High Priest. He would like you to deliver this letter of invitation to the Gilberta Company as soon as possible. Fran took the letter from my outstretched hand, then immediately passed it to Gil. Understood. Gil, please change, then go and deliver this. Got it. Be right back. Gil rushed back to Mine's chambers, the letter in one hand and the bucket of water in the other. It was nothing short of bizarre to see what was once the greatest problem child in the temple doing his duties as an attendant so eagerly. It must be rough having so few attendants now. We will be taking on 2 new attendants today. I would like to think things will get easier once they're here. It seemed that they were replacing Delia. What a shame. I would much rather you continue struggle for a bit longer, I thought as I turned my back to Fran. Until next time. On my way back to the high priest's room, the blue priest, Brother Egmont, spotted me and immediately came rushing over. Arnold, what in the world happened yesterday? The high bishop's room is locked. There are no grey priests standing by the door, and nobody I've asked knows what had happened. Surely the high priest has some idea what's going on, he yelled, spit flying out of his mouth. He was one of the high bishop's cronies, and would sometimes even act haughty around the high priest when he had the high bishop there for protection. Oh great, another high bishop supporter. Just perfect. I wonder if this is the guy who called her a plebeian before. Sorry, I get a Starbucks drink. It's a Frappuccino, and it tastes so freaking good. I resisted the urge to wipe my face while repeating what the high priest had instructed me to say. He will explain the circumstances to everyone when the time comes. Unfortunately, I was cleared from the room, and so do not know the details myself. That means you know something, though, right? Come now, tell me. I do not know the changes, but the high bishop was imprisoned by the Archduke and the Knight's Order. I truly do wonder what happened, I said in a curious tone, all the while observing Brother Egmont, who paled on the spot. His haughty behavior had only been permitted thanks to the high bishop's protection. And now that he was gone, the high priest would no doubt be the next high bishop. Ha ha, you don't even know. Oh my god, I cannot wait to find out what their expressions are when they find out that Rosemine, aka mine, will be the next high bishop. Oh my god, that will be so freaking satisfying. What miserable fate now awaited Brother Egmont, I couldn't wait to find out. There was nothing quite so refreshing as trash getting what they deserved. I agree with Arnold on this one. Even though the guy is a piece of trash himself. Yeah, I agree. He does deserve it. I started making my way back to the high priest. Just as I was approaching his room, I saw him leaving with Zam, another of his attendants. I walked over to them. High priest, where might you be going? I believe today is the funeral, and I would like to be at the chapel for it. Arnold, prepare to welcome the Gilberta Company. Funerals that involved going to the temple's chapel tended to be for commoners, and the high priest practically never went to receive the report of death himself. So why is he going out of his way to attend this time? I wondered as I returned to his room and began preparations. Not long after, I received a report that the Gilberta Company's carriage had arrived at the back gate. I headed to the entrance to welcome them inside. Thank you for coming today, I said, guiding them to the room and then leaving. The high priest seemed to want to proceed with as much secrecy as possible and was once again clearing the room of all attendants. Truly, what had happened last night? Excuse me. I knew nothing outside of the fact that we will be visiting Sister Mine's room in the afternoon. It's time, Arno. Understood. Once their meal was finished, I followed the high priest's orders and headed for Sister Mine's room with the sheets of plant paper he had handed me. The high priest knit his brow tighter than usual. His heavy frown made it clear that he was conflicted about something, but since I knew nothing of the circumstances, I decided there was no need for me to think any more about it. I walked down the hallway and stood in front of the door to the orphanage director's chambers, which took me back to when I was the former director's attendant. Oh no, I don't want to think about this. Really, I really don't want to think about this. It still felt so strange having to ring the bell of arrival just so I could enter. And when I did, Fran answered the door just like he would back then. Please come inside, High Priest, he said. The hall was unchanged from when Sister Margaret had lived there. Oh. Yeah. I really don't like Sister Margaret. From what I've heard about her, she is an awful, awful person. Or was an awful person. Perhaps due to mind reusing the furniture. These similarities made my memories of the past even more vivid, and I smiled nostalgically as the high priest began talking to Fran beside me. How is she? She has a small fever, but she is dressed and ready. I have gathered all her attendants as requested. I climbed the stairs with Fran and found myself instinctively looking around for Sister Margaret. No, God, quit mentioning her. In my mind's eye, I saw her rich golden hair and her deep blue eyes, crinkled in a smile that never left her face. The beauty mark above her lips was this... Oh, no. I don't want to read this, guys. I really don't. If you've read the light novel and gotten this far and know what I'm talking about, then you understand why I don't want to read about this. Was essential as anything I had ever seen, and her gesturing hand was enough to make my heart pound. But unlike in my memories, it was Sister Mine and her attendants inside the director's room, the furniture looking a little more flush, former looking a little more flush than usual, perhaps due to her fever. There were 2 girls among them who I didn't recognize, both of whom were looking this way anxiously. They were most likely Delia's replacements. As they were not yet of age, they had been a few opportunities for us to meet. Who were these 2? The high priest asked. Monica and Nicola, Sister Mine replied. I spoke yesterday about taking them on as attendants to replace Delia. They will take care of me and help the chefs in the kitchen. I see. In that case, let us discuss the future. What the high priest said next was truly shocking. Sister Mine was in fact the daughter of an archnoble who had been sent to the temple and disguised as a commoner for her own protection. Her true name was Rosemine. Yeah, right. Is he really believing that? Seriously. Well, then again, whatever. Despite having seen her commoner family several times before, my first reaction was not surprise, but rather understanding. The temple was ruled by the oppressive whims of the Blue Priests. There was no point in arguing with their unreasonable expectations and demands. The decisions they made became the proper way of the world. Regardless of what they thought on the inside, the attendants of Sister Mine, or rather Lady Rosemine, all nodded to understanding. It was surely easier for them to understand serving an archnoble than a commoner. Rosemine will be baptized in her father's mansion this summer, and at the same time be adopted by the Archduke. She will then assume the position of High Bishop, the High Priest said, which made many of Lady Rosemine's attendants blink in surprise. It was clear from their expressions that they had heard what he said, but could not understand it. I felt the same way. It was not particularly rare for nobles to hide or be forced to send their pre-baptism kids to the temple, where adult Blue Priests would serve as their guardians. Since nobles announced their children at their baptism ceremony, it was normal to send children who would never be announced to the temple before it happened. The idea that an archnoble's daughter had been hidden and raised in the temple with the high priest as her guardian made perfect sense, and was readily agreeable. That said, it was a bit much to say that Lady Rosemine would be replacing the High Bishop. The High Bishop has earned the ire of the Archduke through multiple criminal acts and is already imprisoned as we speak. I will assume the duties of High Bishop until Rosemine is formally adopted by the Archduke and can assume the position herself. He said he would assume the duties of High Bishop, but since he was already doing over half his work, that wouldn't increase his workload much at all. In fact, the lack of complaints and tedious instructions would likely mean a decreased workload overall. Rosemine will be educated and trained in her father's mansion until her baptism ceremony. There will be an inauguration ceremony for her afterward, which all of you will need to prepare for as her attendants. The High Bishop's room will also need to be prepared for her. These chambers will be used as a meeting place when residents from the lower cities, such as those from the Gilberta Company, are summoned. Out of all the baffled attendants, Fran was the first to recover. What is needed for the High Bishop's inauguration ceremony? Your job is simply to prepare the High Bishop's room for Rosemine's use. I'll prepare the clothes myself. Really? Okay. Fran nodded, took out his diptych, and began writing something. I'm assuming writing all this new information down. And also, I'm curious as to what they're going to have to do, because, Rosemine's tiny. The High Priest turned to Lady Rosemine. Rosemine, I have already discussed this with Benno, but we will need to look into other orphanages that we can use to spread your printing business to other cities. Those sent need to understand the inner workings of your orphanage workshop. Who would you choose for this job? Lady Rosemine looked around at her attendants, and a smile touched her lips as her gaze fell upon Gil, whose eyes were shining in anticipation. I think I might ask Gil to handle this. He is more deeply involved with the workshop than anyone else, and has spent the most time with the Gilberta Company. That surprised me. It was truly hard for me to believe that she trusted Gil enough to do work outside the city. I had been sure that she would send Fran, but perhaps he wasn't needed here as much as I thought. Well, not for all that, because as we know, Gil has been managing the workshop every single frickin' day, as far as we know. So, who better than to send him, out of all of her attendants? Of course she'd send Gil. In fact, I'd be shocked if she didn't send Gil. Fran, you have to train Nicola and Monica on top of preparing the room for me. Don't you? I know this will be putting an extra burden on you, but without Gil here, I need you to keep the workshop running as well. As you wish. Oh, he was instead being crushed under the burden of all the remaining work. That pleased me, but the small smile on his face was infuriating. He was serving a blue shrine maiden just like he had been when he served Sister Margaret as an apprentice attendant. and yet he seemed much happier following Lady Rosemine's orders. Well, I mean, considering what Sister Margaret did to him and how Sister Mine treats him, night and day on this one. It was a stark contrast to the Fran who would bite his lip and frown tearfully whenever Sister Margaret gave him orders. It made no sense to me. Like I said, it makes perfect sense, considering how Sister Margaret treated him, and how Mine treats him. Like I said, night and day. Of course he'd be happier serving someone who treats him well. If Gil would need to travel outside the city to help establish workshops, should I select a Grey Priest to manage the orphanage's workshop in his place? Lady Rosemine asked. That is not something you need to decide right away. It is more important that we get a musician for the baptism, as there will be many tea parties and feasts in your future. I was thinking you could buy Rosina as your personal musician. What do you say to that? Sister Mine, Lady Rosemine, please, oh please buy me. Rosina's face beamed with excitement. It was exceptionally rare for shrine maidens to be purchased, as anything but servants with music teachers being no exception to that. It seemed the high priest truly did respect her talent as a musician. That seems fine to me. I would love to have Rosina as my musician, especially as it would be nice to have someone I know by my side. But I would like for her to continue helping Fran until I move to the Nobles' Quarter. I thank you ever so much, Rosina said. Her leaving Lady Rosemine's attendance would greatly increase the burden on Fran, especially since she had just come of age and became used to her work. It was clear that Fran wanted to congratulate her but could not, and his conflicted expression brought a smile to my face. Jerk. Moving on. Here, Vandal sent these for you. Lady Rosemine scanned the documents given to her, then put a hand on her cheek. I was planning on taking Ella with me to the Nobles' Quarter to make sweets for me and Hugo, and Todd will be sent to Lace's place to learn more about noble recipes for the Italian restaurant. I wonder whether I can leave the cooking here to Nicola and Monica. They may not be skilled enough to serve you yet, Lady Rosemine, but they should be fine as long as their food is edible for us attendants, Fran replied. It seemed that her attendants were forced to cook as well. Just how low on manpower were they? Oh, shut it, Arno. I blinked in surprise, but the high priest just shook his head in exasperation. Rosemine, that is nothing to worry about. You could just take on more attendants as needed. High priest, this is the best I can do with my income. Think, fool. You now have an archnoble as your father and will soon become the high bishop with the archduke as your adoptive father. Up until now, you have had to earn all your money yourself. But it should be obvious that this will no longer be the case, the high priest said, the exasperation in his tone now much more clear. Lady Rosemine was attempting to settle things using exclusively her own money despite becoming both the daughter of an archnoble and the high bishop. It seemed she was having difficulty adjusting her mindset to her new circumstances. In any case, Lady Rosemine becoming the high bishop meant that Fran would become the head attendant of the high bishop, which in turn would make him of a higher status than me. Ha ha. That was not entirely pleasing, and reminded me of how Sister Margaret had given him more affection no, I don't want that, than she had given me, and valued him more as an attendant. Allow me to correct myself. It was extremely displeasing. In fact, it was so frustrating that I would be content simply bullying and tormenting him in subtle ways so that the high priest would not notice. The high priest had entered the temple after the death of Sister Margaret, so he did not know that the mere sight of a blue shrine maiden had made Fran feel sick for some time, nor that he had traumatic memories in the orphanage director's chambers. That was exactly why I had recommended Lady Rosemine stay in these chambers, and why I suggested Gil serve alongside him. It had been more entertaining to see Fran's displeased, pained, and miserable expressions during the trauma extermination mission and the dedication ritual, and while Lady Rosemine was suffering as a result of my malice, that was a sacrifice I was willing to make. And yet Fran was now serving Lady Rosemine entirely as though he had conquered his past. The sight of him calmly spending time in this room was a clear sign of how much he had grown, and while that frustrated me to no end, I hid my irritation beneath an expressionless mask. The high priest took out a magic tool, a ring with a large blue face stone embedded into it. Rosemine, have this. It is a gift from your father. Which father? Karnstadt? I'm assuming? Or her future father. Rosemine took the ring from the high priest's hand and placed it on her finger. The face stone was large enough that it looked odd on her small hand. Use it to register your mana with this door. Follow me. Oh boy. The high priest pulled aside the canopy of the bed to reveal another door, just like the one in his room. The very sight was nostalgic, frustrating, and sent waves of emotion through my heart. I quelled them and looked toward Fran. As expected, his face had paled, and he was looking at the door with fearful eyes. Despite how calm he had been acting before, it seemed that he had not entirely conquered his past, because she didn't even have access to that room until just now. So of course he's going to be fine, as long as he doesn't have to go in the room. I could feel a dark joy spreading through my chest. Jerk. What's wrong, Fran? You look unwell, Lady Rosamond said, giving Fran a concerned look. It is nothing. Pay me no mind. Surely it's something. You look as though you've seen a ghost. Oh, you have no idea, little girl. Fran's expression twisted into a troubled frown as everyone looked at him worriedly. That was to be expected. He certainly didn't want anyone to know about his past. No, I don't want to read this. I really don't. Trigger warning. Mentions of sexual abuse are probably about to show up. Where Sister Margaret had called for and taken him into that room practically every night. Kinda gives you an indication of what the heck happened. High Priest, I interjected. I will spare everyone the details, but Fran does not have good memories in that room. It will be fine, Fran. The room is created by magic, and will not be the same one you are familiar with, the High Priest said casually, unaware of Fran's circumstances. Though, considering that, I am sure he probably will have looked into it. He then shifted his focus to registering Lady Rosamond's mana with the door. Considering that just seeing the door was enough to drain the blood from his face, Fran would surely feel an enormous amount of stress regardless of what was inside. But nobody seemed to notice that, all thanks to Fran working as hard as he could to appear calm on the surface, no doubt. And that concludes the registration. You may use that room when you wish to discuss matters you want no one to hear, even your attendants, as voices out here can be heard elsewhere even if you clear the room. Can anyone go inside? Unlike my workshop, there are no special restrictions in place. It was likely that she would be using that room daily from now on. The sight of Fran enduring his stress and fear alone, unable to say a word of complaint, made me very pleased. Are you okay, Fran? I asked. Thank you for helping me there, Arno. I will have to explain your situation to the High Priest if he asks. My apologies, Fran, but my hands are tied. More than likely, the High Priest will do his own research before asking Arno anything. Because Arno could be biased. Very, very biased on this, I might add. I intend to tell him everything regardless of whether he asks. How does it feel to know that the High Priest you respect so much will know the secrets of your past that you want to keep hidden more than anything else? Yeah, you guys can't see it, but I'm doing a middle finger for Arno. Fuck you. I offered a small smile, hiding the poison beneath it, and Fran gave a defeated nod. I imagine that the High Priest will ask for details, but nothing can be done about that. I will just have to be thankful that Sister Mine, or rather Lady Rosamond, has not heard about it. Oh, so you are more concerned about Lady Rosamond finding out than the High Priest. Ah, I wonder when and where I shall inform her then. You are a bastard, you know that? Fran had received the affection of Sister Margaret that I desired so much, and yet rejected her. Fran had just watched as Sister Margaret fell into despair, having become unable to return to noble society due to sleeping with a Grey Priest. Yeah, that's exactly what happened. I told you guys. He did nothing to stop her from killing herself. Yeah, she died. By her own hand, I might add. Because it's essentially, from what I remember, it's taboo to do that. To have sex with the Grey Priest when you're a blue priest or blue shrine maiden. No, it's for blue shrine maidens, I think. Because, I mean, the blue priests do that for flower offerings, but it's not okay the other way around. So, apparently, yeah, evil lady here. Fran thanked the gods in utter relief when Sister Margaret died. I have not forgiven you, Fran. Better, maybe lessen the workload. How much more do I have left? Friggin' everybody and their mother is dumping work on me. Do they want me to die or something? The day after I heard that mine had become Rosamine, the High Priest summoned me to the temple. I figured he would since I knew so much about mine's circumstances, but the day after the incident, I never saw that coming. That was way too fast for a noble. It always took them days and days to set up meetings. Well, they might not have much time on that. The store got busier after second bell thanks to the gates opening. It was then that Gil came rushing in carrying a letter of invitation. It was the first time I'd ever gotten one from a noble with no date or anything written on it. All it said was to come as soon as possible. Take care of the store while I'm gone, everyone. Mark and I hurriedly got changed before heading to the temple at once. This is going to be an extremely important meeting that determined the Gilberta Company's future. We knew that if the high priest determined we weren't necessary for Rosamund, the daughter of an archnoble, he could have us eliminated at any given moment. It was time to fight for our survival. I appreciate you coming on such short notice, Benno. Arno, clear the room. The discussion was secretive enough that the high priest cleared the room even of his attendants. Do you know why you're here? To discuss Lady Rosamund, I would think. Word travels fast, I see. Who knows? There was no point in lying, so I decided to just tell the truth. Besides, the high priest was the closest person to Rosamund in the temple, and I didn't want him distrusting me. Everyone who was there with me in the store when mine's family visited us. Mark, Lutz, and another Harl of mine, Leon. That should be everyone. I informed him that Lutz and Otto had taken refuge in my home after the fight in the streets, and that mine's family had stopped by to get Lutz. That reminds me, Daniel did mention that Lutz had gotten wrapped up in this, the high priest murmured. He then began telling me about Rosamund. She was the daughter of an archnoble who had been entrusted to the temple, and she had created the Rosamund workshop in order to save the orphanage. Her achievements were so great that the Archduke elected to adopt her, and once she was baptized, she would take up the position of High Bishop. We can make the fact that she established a workshop before her baptism look less suspicious by embellishing her giving work and food to orphans. Benno, inform those who know of mine and her workshop in as convincing of a manner as possible. Remember well that you can be purged at any time if deemed necessary. Understood. Gunter had told me the same thing, but the words carried a lot more weight when it was from a noble like the high priest saying it right into my face. I know that I'm asking a lot of you, but the Archduke is unfamiliar with lower city matters, and I do not wish for him to grow tired and simply begin to eliminate everyone who knew Rosamund as a commoner, one by one. That can still happen if we are not careful. I swallowed hard. It was simple for nobles to eliminate commoners who were inconveniencing them. The Archduke protected his duchy, and there was absolutely no doubt in my mind that he'd pick a money-making revolutionary like Rosamund over us. Controlling the spread of information about mine and Rosamund immediately shot up to be my absolute highest priority. Furthermore, have this. It is from the Archduke. The high priest handed me a directive from the Archduke. It contained all the flowery prose of a noble, but among all there were two broad instructions. The first was pretty much, "Hey pal, remember that plan for the printing business we discussed? Get going." And second was, "I'm going to come check out that eatery of yours once the Starbind ceremony is over. Better finish up soon." Can you imagine how terrified I was when the blue priest coming to tour the workshop turned out to be the Archduke? At the time, I was more shocked than anything else, but now the thought just hurt in my head. I was sure I had 2 years of leeway before the printing business took off, but now I had none. I could feel my head spinning, but now wasn't the time to be reeling in shock. My life depended on me carrying out these unreasonable orders. He said that he would be sending a merchant and a scholar official to a nearby town's orphanage. You will need to attend a meeting to discuss this ahead of time. When will that be? A meeting with a scholar, in other words, a noble, wasn't something I could trust to anyone else. I would need to keep my schedule absolutely open, and assuming that Mark would be coming with me, I needed to make sure the store was prepared to operate without us. I would imagine not immediately, since he will have to discuss matters with the scholar first. May I ask that someone from the temple's orphanage accompany us? Someone familiar with the orphanage both before and after the workshop was established would be ideal, if possible. Nothing will get done if I was alone with the scholar. He would just view a merchant like me with contempt and suspicion. So having someone who both understood the temple orphanage and was close to Rosamund, the future high bishop, and adopted daughter of the Archduke would make a big difference. I'd borrow as much authority as I could if doing so would keep myself and the others protected. A fair suggestion. I will ask Rosamund to send one of her attendants along with you. It is much appreciated. And if I may, I would like to ask whether the Archduke is, serious about this second matter. Nobody would believe me if I said that the Archduke was visiting a lower city eatery, not even if I showed them the directive. The high priest glared at the directive with a bitter frown, then gave a slow nod. He said he would like to discuss your findings over a meal. His reasoning is that you would not be able to speak your mind in the audience chamber. Hold on a second. So this isn't just him dropping by for a meal. He's telling me to give a full report on the other town's orphanage and the printing business without holding anything back? No way. Would I be right to think that this is him telling me to go on this inspection, compile my findings, and then report it to him at the Italian restaurant? You would indeed. And this is happening right after the Star Festival. That would be correct. I swallowed the urge to shout, "That's impossible!" and instead just rubbed my temples to ease my growing headache. The high priest gave me the most sincere look of sympathy I had ever seen. "You have no choice but to consider this a test of your abilities and endure," he said, offering me barbed words of encouragement in a tone that sharply contrasted his usual restrained, noblesque demeanor. I widened my eyes in surprise. He was actually letting his emotions show. As I took a closer look, I could see the unmistakable signs of exhaustion on his face. Given how he had summoned me first thing in the morning after the events of yesterday, I could safely guess that he had spent all night clearing up the mess. No wonder he's showing emotions. He's exhausted! In an instant, I understood that he was always being dragged around by the rampaging Archduke. He probably had an even rougher time with things than I did, considering he was close to both him and Rosemine. Somehow, knowing that there was someone out there suffering even more than me was a huge relief. May I ask how many nobles there will be in total? The Archduke himself visiting an eatery in the lower city is unprecedented, which makes it a bit hard to prepare for. Of course there is no damn precedent, he replied, clear irritation on his face. Our eyes met, so I went ahead and gave a casual shrug as if to say, "We both have it rough, huh?" Thankfully, it seemed he understood my intent. His expression softened just a little, and a sardonic smile crept onto his face. "You will be stuck dealing with the Archduke for as long as you continue associating with Rosemine. I have my hands full with the temple and the nobles' quarter, so I shall entrust the lower city, and all of the suffering that comes with it to you." I would like to refuse from the bottom of my heart, but I don't believe that's an option. If refusing was an option, I would be doing it so myself. We exchanged a small laugh, and then the high priest's expression stiffened once more. "As for how many nobles will be visiting the eatery," he continued, "there will be the Archduke, the commander of the Knights Order to guard him, Rosemine as a central figure in printing, and myself. There will be several other knights here as guards, but they will not be eating at the table with us. That said, they will be taking turns eating elsewhere, as a secondary eating area will need to be prepared. Even just a lay noble visiting a lower city eatery would cause a huge stir, but the Archduke himself was coming this time. We wouldn't even have the leeway to exploit this for marketing purposes. Our best option would be to hide it as much as possible to avoid any trouble. It was impossible to predict what would happen with the Archduke, the commander of the Knights Order, the High Bishop, and the High Priest all in one place. Yeah, because at that point she'd be the High Bishop. I grimaced while writing down the High Priest's advice. This was going to be far too much work. Neither the printing nor the Italian restaurant were the Gilberto Company's main business, so there weren't many people I could put on them for help. That said, I couldn't slack on the printing business now that I had a direct order from the Archduke. I needed to get the work done no matter what, and I had to think about how to lessen the blowback against the Gilberto Company growing so rapidly. There was no end to what I had to do. So much to do? Good lord, man! First of all, I needed to find a way to stop the guildmaster from whining and getting in my way every time I needed a formal proof or something. He would settle down on the surface if I said I was working for the Archduke, but he would no doubt work against me in more subtle ways to compensate. I needed some kind of bait. If so many nobles will be joining the Archduke, I would like to have my chefs train elsewhere. They are currently training in Lady Rosemine's chambers, but would it be a problem for me to send them elsewhere? I intend to educate Rosemine in the nobles' quarter prior to her baptism. I imagine it will be done fine once she has left, but I will check to be sure. Could you deliver these to her then? I wrote down on some sheets of plant paper, that I will be asking the guildmaster to become a partner in the Italian restaurant. I would use that restaurant as bait to get his help in the future, thereby lessening my workload and the blowback I will be facing. Meanwhile, I would send Hugo and Todd to train at the guildmaster's house, where they will learn some more noble recipes. While I was writing the letter, the high priest took a bundle off a shelf and brought it to the table. Rosemine's inauguration as High Bishop will begin as soon as her baptism ceremony is over. The plan is to hold it right before the Starbind ceremony, and I ask that you alter these to her measurements. It spread it out in front of me, and I immediately recognized it as the High Bishop's ceremonial robes. Rosemine's archnoble father will be preparing her baptism clothes, but the temple had to prepare her High Bishop's outfit, and they simply lacked the seamstress to do it. You have Rosemine's measurements already, no? Don't worry about the sash. She can use the one she has already. I have heard about these special sewing techniques she likes to request. I trust you to know what she wants. Furthermore, I will be ordering a ceremonial hair stick that use the highest quality thread to adorn it with fanciful flowers. Understood. To summarize, I had just been told to control the flow of information concerning Rosemine, kickstart the printing industry, finish the Italian restaurant, and do my actual job of making clothes and accessories. I'm gonna die. At this rate, I'm actually going to be crushed under my workload and die. That's your fault, dude, for starting all this. If you hadn't picked up the Italian restaurant thing, that might not have happened. When I returned to my store with the burden of overwhelming work already weighing me down, Leon was there to tell me that the Guildmaster had summoned me. I listened to his report while changing out of my noble clothes. It seems he wants to discuss Lady Rosemine. Just where did he hear about that? Leon wondered out loud. I had heard about it directly from Mine's family, so I faced some potential problems unless I figured out the Guildmaster's source. I clicked my tongue and sent a return message saying that I would meet him that afternoon, which meant I had to rush and finish my highest priority businesses before the message got back from the Merchants Guild. Mark, send someone to the smithy and get them to keep on making metal letter types. Get Bierce's ink workshop to make more printing ink too. Tell them we're gonna spread printing through the duchy at the Archduke's orders. Regardless of how the Infinite inspection went, nothing would change the fact that the printing business would be expanding into an industry. The sooner I got things ready, the better. Mark, having finished changing, nodded and let out a lengthy sigh. Now that it has come to this, we will have to get the Guildmaster involved as soon as possible. We will never be able to keep up if each form takes days upon days to be approved. That's what I'm going to talk to him about today. The geezer's a pain in the ass to deal with, but thanks to his nose for money, he's not impossible to work with. I left it at that and finished changing, then grabbed the robes the High Priest had given me and ran up the stairs to Karina's place. Karina, we've got an urgent job. Alter these robes so they'll fit mine. I spread out the white ceremonial robes and Karina widened her eyes in shock. But, Benno, aren't these the High Bishop's robes? I'm asking for mine's measurements here, but it's got to be the daughter of an archnoble wearing them. Lady Rosemine, not mine. Take care not to mix them up. Karina lowered her eyes, then gave a deliberate nod. She had probably heard some details from Otto, but she was a merchant who dealt with nobles just like I did. She knew well that at times you just had to accept the unreasonable and do your job. I understand. Also, they ordered a fancy hair stick to use at her baptism ceremony. That means it should be themed around the color white. Use blue for the season and some gold for her eyes too, but this is an important job. I think we should get some real experienced craftsmen to do it, I said, indirectly implying that we should get Mine's family to make it. I agree, Karina said with a small giggle. She had heard me loud and clear. With Karina clear on what work she had to do, I climbed back down the stairs right as my messenger returned from the Merchants Guild. All right, I'm heading to the guild, Mark. Get everything ready. It already is. I arrived at the Merchants Guild and was immediately led into the Guildmaster's office. I found him waiting inside with his granddaughter, Frida. Judging by how he wasn't actually pompous like usual, he was probably as worked up about this as I was. Benno, you know about Rosemine, don't you? I'll be blunt. Everything to do with Rosemine is being kept extremely secret. Where's the leak? How'd you find out? Depending on your answers, the nobles could kill us all. So you do know then, Frida smiled. The noble I signed with has a younger brother who is assigned to guard as apprentice Blue Shrine Maiden, you see. Frida began discussing her own circumstances and what had happened when she had gone to get her magic tool emptied. The knight had been brought to her room unconscious. Some light had burst into the room out of nowhere and dusted over him, after which he shouted about an apprentice Shrine Maiden being in danger and rushed to go help her. Given that mine was the only apprentice Blue Shrine Maiden, Frida checked her magic contracts to check whether she was alive, and there she had found that her name had been changed to Rosemine. The knight she mentioned must have been the bodyguard who had been following mine around everywhere since winter. I never would have thought that he was connected to Frida and the Guildmaster. Now then, Benno, tell us everything you know, the Guildmaster said. For a second, I considered whether I should keep the rest to myself, but the geezer and his granddaughter already knew mine pretty well. The coming days would probably be easier for me if I just went ahead and told them the situation now. That way, they'd be stuck dealing with Rosemine and the Archduke just like I was. Sure, but if I do, I'm going to need you to be fully cooperative from now on. Oh? You instructing me? The Guildmaster raised an amused eyebrow, acting unfazed, but I see a faint glimmer of worry in his eyes. No matter how rich he was and how much influence he had in the lower city, a noble could easily snap their fingers and have him dead by noon. Almost everything he and his granddaughter knew about Rosemine was speculation, and unless they got firm details soon, they had no way to avoid potentially stepping on Noble's toes. I knew they wanted information more than anything else. Yep, I'll be on top here whether you like it or not. Are you telling me to hand over my seat as Guildmaster? Don't be stupid. Does it look like I want to deal with Guildmaster duties on top of everything else? No, I just want you to stop being a pain in my ass and show some cooperation. I didn't have a time to deal with this city's Guildmaster duties while working on spreading an industry throughout an entire duchy. That would actually kill me. We glared at each other for a moment, and then the Guildmaster nodded. Show cooperation, It seems a noble of fairly high status is involved here. Very well. I told him and Frida the cover story about mine dying. She was now the daughter of an archnoble, soon to be adopted by the Archduke, and we will be spreading bookmaking throughout the duchy as government business under the Archduke. I am absolutely terrified, he replied. I must admit, I did not expect her to have been adopted by the Archduke, Frida agreed. Rosamund was now the daughter of an archnoble, soon to be adopted by the Archduke. She was not someone they could treat lightly. The Guildmaster with all his noble associates knew that well. With printing being a duchy-wide industry, I need the full cooperation of the Merchants Guild. You know how dangerous it is to complain about an industry that has the Archduke's backing, yeah? The Guildmaster fell into thought, clearly trying to work out how much he could profit from this. I tossed him some bait. Mind if I send my chefs to train at your place? I want them to learn more about noble cooking before the Archduke and Archnobles visit the eatery. Given that the actual nobles were visiting the store, it would be wise to teach them not just mine's recipes, but normal noble recipes as well. I also wanted to lessen the potential blowback on us by getting the Guildmaster involved. What is in it for me? I let you invest in our Italian restaurant and become a partner. How's that sound? I had started the restaurant after the Guildmaster's chef taunted me. But considering that I needed to handle spreading the printing industry throughout the duchy, I didn't have the time to expand my horizons into eateries. On top of that, the only ones who had chefs who could cook noble food and who nobles well enough to run the Italian restaurant was the Guildmaster. And I had no doubt that his home was full of servants trained to serve food. Very well. How much funding do you need? I wonder. Frida replied, her eyes gleaming as she jumped at the offer before even the Guildmaster could. How much more? How much more do I have left? 49 more pages. That's probably 5-6 pages for the afterword. Fran, to serve as the High Bishop's attendant. Excuse me, Lady Rosamund. When third bell rings, I'll be leaving with Gil to clean the High Bishop's room. Fran, are you feeling better already? You're not in pain at all? Lady Rosamund asked, her face a little red from fever as she rested upon her bed in the orphanage director's chambers. She was inquiring once again about the wounds I had received when fighting the devouring soldiers that the High Bishop and Count Bindewald had brought into the temple, and I couldn't help but smile at her continued concern. As I have said, my wounds were completely healed by a sudden appearing light that rained down on me. Please worry about yourself rather than me. You now have to live as the daughter of an archnoble, Lady Rosamund, and that is much more concerning. There was a magic ring with a heavy-looking stone on the middle finger of Lady Rosamund's left hand, a symbol of her current status. She saw me glance at it and forced a small smile. It hurts a little every time someone calls me Rosamund, like I'm being reminded that I'm no longer mine. I hope I can get used to it soon, before I go to the Noble's Quarter at least. It seemed that we weren't the only ones having trouble adjusting to her new name. I had been told just enough to understand that Lady Rosamund was the daughter of an archnoble, and would soon be adopted by the Archduke. Fran, you faced off against Count Bindewald, and were there when Lord Sylvester appeared. You can guess what I'm feeling without me needing to even say it, can you? Please keep this a secret from the High Priest, she said before murmuring weakly about how worried she was for her commoner family, and how she doubted she would ever be able to be a proper noble. The High Priest had told me to always report when Lady Rosamund became sad or uneasy, since unstable emotions could lead to her losing control of her mana. What will be the best course of action here? While struggling to decide whether I should keep her feelings a secret, I took out a book I had borrowed from the book room and offered to her. As your fever appears to have mostly gone down, you may read as long as you stay in bed. Will that help cheer you up? Thanks, Fran. As Lady Rosamund gleefully hugged the thick book to her chest, I gave her some space and began looking around the room. I could see Rosina smiling brightly as she polished the large harpspiel. Rosina, I must go and clean up the High Bishop's room with Gil. Please take care of Lady Rosamund while I'm gone. She will no doubt be absorbed in her books, so you will need to observe that time and tell her to drink water when necessary. I understood, Rosina replied, her eyes not leaving the harpspiel for a second. I can understand that she was overjoyed to rise from a great shrine maid into a noble's personal musician, but she still had much to do, including teaching Monica and Nicola. I could not trust two newly taken on apprentice attendants with taking care of Lady Rosamund. Rosina, please take care to do your job. If Monica and Nicola are not trying to take your place, it will be longer before I can inform the High Priest that you are ready to leave for the Noble's Quarter. As Lady Rosamund was a woman, there were many duties that only great shrine maidens could perform. For one, it was their job to wash her and then change her clothes. In the past, I had assumed that I could teach them since I had learned to do both while serving the High Priest, but was forced to change my attitude upon seeing Rosina teach Delia. The work was the same, but there were many different expectations between the genders. I am to some degree capable of teaching them how to change her clothes, store her clothes, help her bathe, and assist her in preparing for rituals. But doing her hair, selecting ornaments, and other such forms of upkeep are beyond me. You must teach them both what you know so that Lady Rosemine will not suffer when staying here in the temple as High Bishop. Remember that while you may have finished teaching Delia, she is no longer here." Rosina blinked in surprise, then let go of the harpspear and went off to fetch Monica and Nicola. That warning would likely be enough for her to teach them properly. I myself went to get Gil, who was busy cleaning on the first floor, and together we exited the director's chambers to meet the High Priest. "Ah, there you both are. Let us head to the High Bishop's room. Zam, inform Fran of our current situation." Zam, one of the High Priest's attendants, brought me up to speed as we walked. It seemed that the Blue Priest had still not been told the details of the incident. All they knew was that the High Bishop had passed away, and those who had deep connections to him were trembling in fear over whatever had brought him down. "Fran, Gil, put away the altar. We will handle the paperwork." Understood. The High Bishop's personal belongings had to be removed so that his room could be prepared for Lady Rosemine. Inside, the High Priest's attendants were busily moving around, though I found it strange that I couldn't see Arno among them. Gil and I began using cloth to delicately wrap up the Bible, the candles on the altar, and so on before moving them to a wooden box for storage. Yeah, Arno's not there for a reason, and you will find out in a bit. What happened? I also measured various pieces of furniture, writing my findings on a diptych to use as a basis when ordering new furniture for Lady Rosemine. Man, I bet when she's the High Bishop Lady Rosemine's going to be pumped. Going to be pumped. Gil said, trying to speak properly now that there were people around. I gently corrected him, noting that pumped should be very pleased instead. But I took it dressed a little easier, knowing that Lady Rosemine would be able to find solace in having new books to read, as everything else about her life changed. "Is that all the paperwork? There's not much here as much here as I expected," the High Priest observed. "We found several wooden boards on one of the shelves," one of his attendants responded. Since the High Priest would be taking on almost all the High Bishop's duties, he and his attendants were prioritizing the paperwork over everything else. But since the High Priest had already taken on so much work from the High Bishop to circumvent his laziness and incompetence when it came to doing his job, there wasn't actually much paperwork there. "I will now take these to the orphanage director's chambers to organize," I said, gesturing toward a number of wooden boxes filled with paperwork and equipment. Gil and I picked up the first one, but as we went to leave, the High Priest called out to me. "Fran, come to my chamber this afternoon. We must discuss transferring the High Bishop's furniture, as well as the High Bishop's duties that Rosemine will need to perform." Understood. I returned to the director's chambers, where I compared my measurements with ones Rosina had taken earlier. As the daughter of the Archduke, Lady Rosemine's furniture will need to be fashionable, expensive, and of course precisely measured. Fourth bell rang. I took Lady Rosemine's book away from her so that she could eat, and then went to the kitchen to eat whatever food was left over, as was customary for us attendants. But it felt strange to be here without Delia, her former role having been taken by Monica and Nicola. "How is your learning going?" I asked them. "Do you think you can manage as attendants?" "Not everyone is lucky enough to be taken on as apprentice attendants. We don't have much time to learn, but we'll try our hardest," Monica said, with a serious expression. Nicola nodded with a smile, adding that with food this good, she would work as hard as was necessary. Her putting her stomach above everything else made me smile. With enthusiasm like that, they would both be masters of their job in no time. According to Rosina, they had been trained in the orphanage by Wilma ahead of time, so their training here was progressing faster than anticipated. After our meal, I took the divine gifts to the orphanage. Once Wilma and Fritz had hurried over to get the gifts, I looked around. Everything seemed to be running as normal. "How are things, Wilma?" "Well, I am a little worried about Delia. She's looking after Dirk all by herself, accepting help from no one. I feel that it won't be long before she collapses." I lowered my eyes a bit upon hearing Delia's name. To speak frankly, she was not someone I was fond of. Both her using her womanhood as a weapon to get the High Bishop to accept her, and prioritizing the orphan Dirk over the one she served, did not sit well with me. I personally did not care what happened to Delia, now that she had betrayed us for the High Bishop, but Lady Rosemine would still worry if something happened to her or Dirk. She had pleaded with the Archduke himself to spare their lives, after all. I do not believe there is much we can do, but let Delia continue on until she collapses. She is in such torment right now that she would likely not listen to anything we have to say to her. Our best course of action is to prepare someone to look after Dirk and someone to look after Delia once she collapses. I see. Very well, then. Wilma sent a worried glance toward the back of the dining hall, then nodded. Upon returning to the director's chambers, I found Gil anxiously waiting for me. "You've got to go to the High Priest's room, right? I'll go check up on the workshop. We're going to be going to the forest tomorrow," he said, so worried that his speech was falling apart. I gave him a warning, and he corrected himself after sucking in some air. "I shall check up on the workshop." Gil, I feel as though there are times where you overload yourself with work that only you can do to secure your place among Lady Rosemine's attendants. However, if you are to be the High Bishop's apprentice attendant, you must learn to delegate your work to other Grey Priests. Lady Rosemine is not the type of person who would cut you off while you work so hard to serve her. Gil frowned and raced off to the workshop while Rosina resumed instructing Monica and Nicola. I gave Rosemine another book so that she would not leave her bed, then went to the High Priest's room. Once inside, I found the High Priest busily sorting through boards and paperwork. They had likely all been taken from the High Bishop's chambers. I appreciate you coming, Fran. How was the girl doing? I heard her fever was lasting longer than usual. It's almost entirely gone now. However, I believe she is still emotionally unstable. She spoke of worrying about her family and feeling anxious about her current position, I reported, and the High Priest's expression softened a bit with relief. We do not need to worry if she's comfortable enough to share her anxieties with you. The potion I gave her this time does not restore much mana, and given how much she spent, her mana should be fine for quite some time. Though, do tell me if you notice any changes. The High Priest's attendants and I discussed what to do with the furniture taken out of the former High Bishop's chambers. His family did not care to have it, so it would instead be distributed among the Blue Priests. Once we had finished arranging the order in which we would put this furniture on display and who would look after it, the High Priest waved a hand. I will now discuss the ritual that Rosemine shall perform as High Bishop. Return to your work, he said, and his attendants all immediately distanced themselves from his desk, leaving only myself and the High Priest there. I took out my diptych once they were all gone to write down what he had to say, at which point he glanced at me, then lowered his voice and seemingly forced his next words out. Fran, I heard about your circumstances from Arno. Yep, Arno told him. Goosebumps rose on my skin and I swallowed hard. Arno had said he would inform the High Priest of my past if asked, but now that it actually happened, I felt as though I wasn't even fit to stand in the High Priest's presence. I instinctively took a step backward. Although I did not know at the time, I can imagine the pain you felt when I ordered you to serve a Blue Shrine Maiden, Fran. Do you wish to continue serving Rosemine? Can you view her as you did me in the past? He asked, fixing his golden eyes on me, speaking not a word of my past. It felt as though he had indirectly said the past did not matter, and I could feel the burden on my heart lighten. You are correct in assuming that. I was depressed at first. Nothing could have been worse for me than returning to the orphanage director's chambers in service of a Blue Shrine Maiden. Lady Rosemine had been given the chambers with the furniture and cutlery unchanged from its last owner, which forced me to remember my past there, but I was shocked to see just how big of a difference a new owner could make. Lady Rosemine took Grey Priests to the lower city when normally they weren't permitted to leave the temple, and she taught those in the orphanage and the workshop the ways of commoners. I could see my environment changing before my very eyes. She started one new thing after another, and I was so caught up following Lady Rosemine as she changed the temple using her outsider influence that I didn't have time to think about my past. Lady Rosemine is nothing like Sister Margaret. She does not use the orphanage for her own benefit. Instead, she fights to improve it as much as she can. She could have treated the orphans like tools to exploit. She could have embezzled the orphanage's budget to line her own pockets. She could have done no meaningful work beyond accepting the payment those who directed the orphanage were given. But she didn't, and that was made Lady Rosemine entirely different from every orphanage director who had come before her. Instead, she used her own funds to save the orphans, giving them work and the means to survive on their own. Only someone raised in the orphanage could truly understand just how wonderful and important Lady Rosemine's impact had been. No doubt so, considering that she had needed to do it all under the noses of the High Bishop and the Blue Priests. All those in the orphanage, from the youngest child to the oldest Grey Priest, respect and thank her. She often baffles me, but even so, I would like to continue serving and being of use to Lady Rosemine however I can. I see. Good then. I have distanced Arno since his own actions have been unduly influenced by his past experience with Blue Shrine Maidens, but I hope that you continue to serve Rosemine well. I nodded, understanding the intent behind the High Priest's short-coded message. Essentially, what the High Priest said is that Arno was dead. Yeah, he killed Arno for knowing too much and what he did. I had thought it strange that Arno was not among the High Priest's other attendants, but it seemed that he had climbed the towering stairway. And given that his past with Blue Shrine Maidens was mentioned, I can guess that Arno was one of Sister Margaret's victims. In noble society, even the smallest of errors can lead to permanent stains. Keep that firmly in mind as you serve Rosemine. It is not enough to just diligently follow orders down to the letter. You must be firm in your guidance, such that she is producing results befitting not just any noble, but the daughter of an archduke. The High Priest said, telling me what we need to do as attendants of Lady Rosemine. and how we would need to prepare ourselves for serving the daughter of an archduke. Understood. I will serve her well and true. The high priest gave a firm nod, then waved a hand. I knelt down, my arms crossed over my chest, and then left the high priest's room to return to the orphanage director's chambers. He wanted results befitting the daughter of an archduke. Lady Rosemine lacked the knowledge that all nobles shared, and was inexperienced as an apprentice shrine maiden. Supporting her such that she would produce results befitting a high bishop adopted by the archduke would require much work, and the weight of such a responsibility sent a shiver down my spine. Lady Rosemine will first stand before the public as high bishop during the starbind ceremony. Before anything else, I must ensure that she does not fail there. Rosina, Monica, Nicola, your assistance, please. I called everyone over and had them begin summarizing all of the rituals on wooden boards so that it would be easier for Lady Rosemine to memorize them later. Each year had a number of rituals, each requiring different things to be memorized. She had to perform her high bishop duties flawlessly, and we all had to support her as best we could to ensure that under no circumstances would she fail. Gil was deeply involved in what interested Lady Rosemine most, bookmaking. It was proving quite useful in that regard, in which case, as Lady Rosemine's head attendant, I would need to focus on supporting her high bishop duties as much as possible. While watching the boards steadily pile up, I shifted my gaze to the bed where Lady Rosemine was resting. Now then, how shall I have Lady Rosemine memorize all of these when she will most likely ask to go to the book room instead? Well, I mean, she wants to read. Let her read that stuff and then she'd have to memorize it. In order to teach her, it seems I will first have to learn a way to stop Lady Rosemine from always charging straight toward books, I muttered. Yeah, easier said than done, man. Rosina heard and glanced toward the bed as well. It will likely prove quite difficult, she said with a quiet giggle, and I couldn't help but nod in agreement. How much more do we have left? I think this is the last one. I hope. Effa facing the future. I awoke in the middle of the night to the sound of Camille crying. Rubbing the sleep from my eyes, I picked him up. It was time for him to be breastfed. His hair and eyes were a similar color to mine, so thoughts of her surfaced in my mind as I was giving milk. Mine had always been so quick to get fevers or become bedridden that for her entire life I had feared she might die, that each fever could potentially be the one that was too much for her. And then, when she had finally gotten healthy for the first time, she was taken far away from me where I would never be able to reach her. But she hasn't actually died, I thought, trying to cheer myself up the same way I always did. When I found myself getting sad, mine was still alive, and even if she couldn't treat us like family anymore, we still had a thin connection to her. That was enough to make just a little bit of my sorrow go away. I wonder if Gunter's okay. I looked at the large lump beneath the blanket beside me, twisting and turning as if unable to sleep. Before I knew it, I let out a heavy sigh. It was important to continue life as normal once the funeral had ended. Gunter had to go back to work, no matter how devastated he was. Which was why he had gone to the gate yesterday. He had begrudgingly left for his day shift at third bell. The fourth bell hadn't even rang before he came trudging home. Apparently he had punched his boss, the gate commander, in the face, and while the others sympathized with his plight, they had told him to go home and cool it. The commander had allegedly said something to him about mine. Nobody knew what exactly, but several people heard Gunter scream, That outsider noble got in because you didn't tell the guard what I told you. It's your fault I lost mine," before diving at the commander and going to town. That was what Otto, one of his subordinates, and the person who had walked him home had told me. Gunter lived for his children, and he cared for mine more than anyone, especially through her sick health. He regretted beyond words that he hadn't been able to stop the noble from breaking into the city, that he hadn't been able to protect mine, and in the end had been protected by mine himself. He was so depressed that it felt as though he was on the verge of throwing his whole life away. I think I should leave him be for a little while longer. I petted Camille's head back lightly to help him burp, then checked his diaper. As I slowly drifted back to sleep, I hoped more than anything that Gunter would recover as soon as possible. Poor guy. I think it's because of mine's blessing, Thule said out of nowhere the next morning while preparing for work. She was beaming a smile that said she was excited at her realization, but I had no idea what she was talking about. What do you mean? Me getting a contract with Mrs. Carina yesterday. I wasn't scared of going to the north part of the city at all, since I was going there to keep my promise to mine. And I wasn't scared of asking Mrs. Carina to hire me. That's definitely thanks to mine's blessings. Yesterday, Thule had gone to the Gilberta Company with Lutz and managed to get an agreement to move to Carina's workshop when it was time for her the hedge contract to be renewed. It came completely out of the blue for Thule, who had previously been anxious about going to that part of the city whenever she had to. I wonder if she'd get mad if I said that reminds me of mine. I still can't believe it. Mrs. Carina actually said she would trust me with making mine's hairpins. I need to get better quick so nobody takes the work away from me. Tully said with a proud smile before quietly adding, "It's all going so well thanks to mine's blessings." If you ask me, it had more to do with the Gilberta Company's plotting than any blessings. They surely hired Tully so that they'd have another connection to mine, now that she was the daughter of a noble and all. Still, Tully was just glad to have another thread connecting to her little sister, who in her eyes wasn't dead yet. It was clear that she thought that if she worked hard, she could keep meeting mine. She was facing the future and charging forward in a display of hope so pure it was dazzling. "You got mine's blessing too, right, Mom? You're moving a little easier than you were before. But still, you shouldn't push yourself. You may not have birthing pains anymore, but you're still going to be exhausted from feeding Camille at night." I felt as though Tully was telling me I needed to face the future too, especially since mine's blessing had cured me of the helpless pain and exhaustion I had felt ever since giving birth. I won't lose to my own daughter here, I thought to myself, and as I put on my cooking apron, I found myself smiling for the first time since mine had gone. I had been blessed by mine, Tully. You don't need to worry about me. And listen, there's second bill. Have a nice day at work. After cheering up a bit and seeing Tully off to her apprentice work, I washed some dishes using a jar of water while keeping an eye on Camille. I glanced around the house and noticed that Tully had already washed the clothes for me, but I would still need to draw more water. The market would also be opening later today, so I would need to go shopping for food as well. We had already finished all the food donated to us by our neighbors. It was tempting for me to just be satisfied with some leftovers for lunch, but with Gunter around, I needed to make something more sizable. Now, where should I start cleaning up, I thought, just as Gunter trudged out of bed. He was up much later than usual, and it wasn't as though he was working a night shift or anything. He stared at me through kind of narrowed eyes as I moved around the house working in my apron. "How come you and Tully can just keep acting normal? Mine's gone, you know. The funeral is over, and our neighbors haven't helped us enough. If Tully and I spent all of our time crying instead of working, who would give milk to Camille or make our food or wash our clothes?" No matter how sad we were or how great the loss was, it was already time for us to get back to work if we wanted to live. Gunter should have known that as well. Not to mention that we're not like most families. Mine gave us a lot of blessings. She gave us the power to strive toward our goals, to deflect malice, to heal our pain, and to endure trials and tribulations. She gave it to all of her loved ones, so I'm fine. Gunter suddenly raised his head in realization. I smiled at him. Tully is striving to keep her promise to mine and make the most of her blessings, but you're just lazing around all day, not even enduring this trial at all. I wonder if that means she doesn't love you. Did you actually get blessed? I asked, already knowing the answer. Dude, that's mean. Gunter's eyes shot up, and of course she does. We had all those final goodbyes, and the burns on my arm healed. Mine loves me for sure. Seeing him overreact when it comes to mine, and getting all pouty was kind of cute in its simplicity. In that case, why don't you face the future and get back to living as well? There's a mountain of things we have to do. If you have the time to skip work, you have the time to help. First comes drawing water. First. And then once that's done, could you go shopping for me? The market's up today, but I still can't go that far with Camille. Mine will get mad at me for sure. Mine hadn't been able to keep quiet for a minute without telling us not to take Camille outside until he was old enough to move his head, due to all of the sicknesses outside. Gunter seemed to remember that as well. He fell silent, searching for words. Look, now Camille's crying. It's time for him to be breastfed. I gave the mopey frowning Gunter a bucket and shooed him out, then picked up the crying Camille and opened the bedroom window. The room lit up in an instant thanks to the dazzling bright sunlight of a summer just beginning. A cool breeze blew inside, and that cheered me up even more, like the wind was blowing away the sad, heavy atmosphere that had built up inside. "Here you are, Camille." I had kept him waiting a bit too long, and his small mouth moved desperately as he drank as much and as quickly as he could. That was when Gunter came back carrying a bucket filled to the brim of water. He frowned harder as he poured it into the jug before going back out to the well. It took Gunter several trips to the well to finish filling the water jug, after which he picked up the shopping basket and left for the market, all the while mumbling about how mine definitely did love him. Oh. I finished feeding Camille, changed his diaper, and then looked around the brightened room as I put him to bed. In the corner, I noticed that dust was starting to pile up. Our bedroom was always ridiculously clean thanks to mine's desperate desire to sleep in a clean room, but now that she was gone, it had gotten dirty after just a few days of nobody cleaning it. I'll have to clean while Camille's asleep. I want to keep things like they were when mine was here as much as possible. Once I had finished, I decided to wash Camille's dirty diapers since there was so many. I spread them out to dry on the lines, at which point Gunter came back carrying a lot of stuff. He had bought a bunch of everything so that we wouldn't have to go shopping again anytime soon. "I'm back. I'm going to put all the stuff in the winter prep room, all right," he said, his bright tone a complete contrast to how miserable he had been on his way out. "Did something happen out there?" On my way there, I bumped into Gil taking the orphans to the forest. I asked about how mine's doing. She's going to be going to the noble's quarters soon, but she's doing good and is mainly just worrying about us. Gil was one of Mine's attendants. He was a kid who often walked her home, and Mine said he was a hard worker who kept the workshop in the orphanage running with Lutz. What did you say to him, Gunter? I'm sure you gave him a message from Mine. I told him to tell her that we're all facing the future and not to worry about us. Hey, what's with that look? I couldn't tell Mine I'm off work for a bit since I punched my commander in the mouth, Gunter said quickly, stumbling over his words and looking generally quite awkward. He wanted to be a dad his kids respected, and especially he didn't want to look uncool in front of Mine. That means you need to go back to work so Mine doesn't worry, now doesn't it? So when are you going? I asked, with a teasing smile. Gunter's brow furrowed in a deep, frustrated frown. He said tomorrow, while avoiding my gaze. But I could see traces of a smile creeping onto his face. There was life in his voice again, and he was looking up instead of down. That was definitely just him putting on a brave face for now. But I knew that he had finally decided to face the future and stride forward, almost certainly because he had finally felt for real that he still had a thin connection to Mine. He knew he could tell her about us by talking to Gil, the kids from the orphanage, and Lutz. Gunter slept soundly that night, not moving at all, even when Kamiel started crying. His mood changed so dramatically in a single day, was so like him that I couldn't help but feel a little happy. Gunter sure does love Mine, doesn't he, Kamiel? His mood turned around completely just from hearing about Mine through Gil, I said, patting Kamiel on the back after feeding him. He replied with a small burp. Nah, come on! I was hoping that was the last one. Whoa, whoa. How much more do I have left? Jesus Christ! It's going to be a 2-hour video, guys. Joseph, Barov's certification. I heard the foremen are going to eat with us today, I said to the Laharls, who were packing away their tools since work was over for the day. They all glanced wearily at Bierce, then one while Pierre whispered to me. Hey, Joseph, that rich patron girl came today, didn't she? Are things good again? We don't want to have dinner like the last one ever again, he teased, but I could sense the worry in his voice. I clenched my fist and gave him a confident grin. Don't sweat it. Tonight's going to be a good night. For everyone except me, that is. I've got to hold Heidi back. There was a moment of silence and everyone started cackling. It's been a long time since the workshop was cheery enough for us to joke around like this, I thought, before a grinning craftsman came over and slapped me on the back. Oh, oi, Joseph, looks like you're going to have to get to work before dinner. Yep, it's already your time to shine. Go get Heidi to clean up. She's still over there thinking to herself, another Laharl said in a now cheery voice, pointing over at Heidi, who was glaring at some materials while deep in thought. How much more do I have left? Good God. 31 pages. I turned back to the craftsman and quickly walked over to where she was. She didn't even notice me and instead just kept mumbling to herself while glaring at a small bowl of materials. Come on, Heidi, give it a rest for today. We're all stuck here until you clean everything up, I said, poking her in the head before grabbing the bowl and lazily handing it over to a nearby Lahange. She had been deep in thought, but not deeply in thought to stop her from shooting out of her chair the moment the materials were taken from her. God, Joseph, wait! Be careful, don't mix the materials. It looked like I had successfully brought her back to reality. I gave the bowl back to Heidi, which was filled with a powder that had been ground down to use for ink. If you've got time to complain, you've got time to clean up. The bell's going to ring soon. Okay, I'll clean up right away, so please be gentle. Come on, it's not you. I'm not you. I'll treat the materials carefully. Everyone nearby was laughing and saying things like, yeah, leaving Heidi to Joseph is always the best move. But honestly, it had been so long since I last heard them teasing us that even their lighthearted mockery was nostalgic. The workshop going back to normal was a huge relief. The Gilberta Company is going to help get the Guildmaster on their side when it comes to selling ink to nobles, Pierce announced. We've also got a patron who's helping fund Heidi's research into colored ink, and we even managed to sell some, so drink as much as you want today, boys. This declaration caused the Laharls to erupt in cheer, and they started chugging beer and munching enthusiastically through the food on the table. I myself downed my mug of beer in one go. Behel in one go. We had made and sold the ink that the Gilberta Company wanted, so that we could form a connection with them, which led to us being able to leave dealing with nobles to them and the Guildmaster. Along the way, we had even found a patron for Heidi's research. If we're not going to celebrate today, when will we? Our hard work's finally paid off a little. We can save the rest for tomorrow. Heidi has a long, rough road ahead of her. That is, as long as we don't tick off our tiny patron. I thought back to the tiny girl who had helped us with our colored ink research earlier today. Lady Mine was kind of a weirdo herself, having quickly become friends with Heidi, the research nut, but I couldn't yell at Lady Mine when she did something weird like I could with Heidi. I had to show more restraint and work out that out with her attendance. Not to mention, if I didn't stop Heidi from researching day in and day out, we'd eat up all of Lady Mine's funding and be in a real bad spot if she refused to give us more. Even when drinking Behel among all the festivities, my head was still filled with thoughts of tomorrow's work. Heidi and I had been entrusted with researching the new ink, which meant I would be doing all of the work except the research itself. It was probably obvious by now, but Heidi was utterly useless outside of research. It took her way too long to do anything, and her lack of progress would just end up annoying everyone around her. That's some nice chugging there, Joseph. You must be happy that the ink we made is selling so well, huh? I bet you wish we could eat with everyone like this every day, Heidi said with a grin, taking a swig of her own Behel. She loved eating with a ton of people like this, especially the other Laharls, but in our workshop, Bierce's family and the Laharls usually ate separately. How many times has Bierce told you that the boys need some time to relax without him being around? Give it up, this is only ever going to be for special occasions. I'm jealous of the Laharls. I want to eat where Dad can't see me sometimes too, she murmured while eyeing Bierce furtively. I laughed and looked his way too. It was true that the Laharls wanted to at least relax and eat meals without him, their boss, watching them. His decision to normally eat separate from them was the right one to make. That said, I had experience of both sides since I had married into Bierce's family through Heidi, and well, it was safe to say that there was a big difference between what the 5 Laharls ate and what we ate. Eating separately was convenient to Bierce in part to save on the Laharls' food costs. There was a lot of reasons and excuses for us eating separately, but regardless of all that, we ate dinner together when there was important news for the workshop. It was the best and worst at times for the Laharls, who loved the better quality food but feared Bierce's news. This time it's good news, but last time it was because Mr. Wolf had died, so yeah. The last time we had eaten with the Laharls was when the former head of the Ink Guild, Wolf, had died under mysterious circumstances, and Bierce ended up unable to refuse the position of guild head. If this meant he had to pick up all the shady underhanded deals that Wolf had been making then, it wasn't strange to think that Bierce would have to start dealing with nobles himself. Naturally, the Laharls all paled after hearing that. The workshop would no doubt crumble without Bierce. The Lahanges could run away when their 3-year contracts ran out, but the Laharls didn't have it so easy. Their fates were tied to the workshop. His daughter and successor Heidi only cared about research, and since I, her husband, wasn't qualified to be a Baruff yet, everyone had been reasonably terrified. I gotta get my Baruff certification as soon as possible. One needed the title of Baruff to be a workshop foreman. Anyone could inherit the workshop when a foreman died, but without the title, the successor's position in the guild could weaken, and he'd have restrictions placed on him. Furthermore, he wouldn't be able to hire any Laharls or Lahanges, and Lahanges wouldn't be able to renew their contracts with him. Everything was decided by skill in the world of craftsmen, and it was a harsh world indeed. You couldn't own a workshop without being a Baruff. Since talentless people owning a workshop could damage the reputation and development of the entire area. You could technically get around this restriction if you had friends in powerful places. A personal workshop not belonging to any guild, generally established by a rich merchant or noble, could be run by a foreman who wasn't a Baruff. But that didn't apply to most people, and in general the death of a foreman meant the death of a workshop. Like Wolf's own ink workshop. Since Wolf was the only one in his workshop who was a certified Baruff, his workshop rapidly deteriorated after he died. Limits were put on trade, and due to rumors coming out about his dark past, several Lahanges canceled their contracts once spring came. I can't let our workshop meet the same fate. I was a Laharl married to the workshop's successor. I was tied to it no matter what happened, and I didn't have the luxury of slacking on getting my Baruff certification. Lazily watching Heidi go nuts over research. Bierce had been forced to become head of the Ink Guild after Wolf died, and in all honesty, it wouldn't surprise me if he dropped dead under arguably equally mysterious circumstances any day now. I need to get my Baruff certification as soon as possible. Bierce had slapped me on the back and said, "Joseph, I'm counting on you," when he became the head of the Ink Guild, and I felt the true weight of that slap more than ever now. Whoa. My heavy thoughts were suddenly interrupted by Heidi jabbing a finger between my eyebrows. Drop the frown already and eat up, okay? What's with you all of a sudden? I need your help for sure to develop the new ink. I won't be able to make so many different kinds myself, so shape up. There's going to be a lot of stuff I want to try tomorrow, Heidi said as she piled meat onto my plate. It took strength and stamina to mix oils and materials together for hours at a time while making the new ink, which meant Heidi would have a real hard time doing it by herself. Am I just an ink-making machine to you, Heidi? Huh? I thought, but despite feeling A little frustrated at my wife for once again thinking about nothing but research, I ate the meat on my plate and drank my Behel. Isn't this great, Dad? I'm so glad the little girl decided to be my patron. Wait, mine is your patron too? So she's got two people she's patron for. It's Johann and Heidi. Everything's going so well now thanks to that. Although our workshop was in a better spot than before, Bierce remained the head of the Ink Guild, and the deals with nobles made in the past were all resting on the Guildmaster's ultimate decision. The fact that Bierce was the only one in the workshop with a Baruch certification was still unchanged as well. The only things that are going well are the new ink selling and you getting research funds. Is that all that matters to you? Come on, I silently yelled at Heidi, who was beaming thoughtlessly as she finished her food. Ever since then, Lady Mine, our patron, visited the workshop seemingly every day to help with our research in colored ink. The colors changed dramatically based on the oil and materials used, and faded over time once put on paper. Overall, the research was leading into a string of failures, but we kept making different kinds of colored ink despite all the problems with Lady Mine writing it all down. What to do, what to do, Heidi murmured, getting absorbed in her research that she would forget to sleep and eat, but she kept repeating that she needed to make ink good enough for Lady Mine like it was a magic spell, as she changed the kinds of inks and researched the market for materials that looked like they would make good colors. None of that was especially new, so despite my exasperation, I wasn't really worried about her. All I had to do was wait for the right opportunity to stuff food into her mouth and watch for when she started wavering in her seat so that I could throw her into bed. Sadly, that wasn't good enough this time. Heidi had been murmuring something about there having to be a secret to all this while chewing on her morning bread, but I just ignored her and went ahead to the workshop. Eventually, a terrified Lahange came rushing up to me. Mr. Joseph, Mrs. Heidi's been arrested or something. What? She hadn't shown up at the workshop yet, but I'd assumed she was so late because she had fallen asleep during breakfast. In reality, she had been captured by art workshop employees after she started fishing around inside while they were drawing. What the hell is she thinking? I thought as I raced down to the street with the Lahange. It wasn't long before I found Heidi surrounded by angry-looking craftsmen. Heidi, what are you doing here? I was chewing on my bread trying to think of good ideas, and suddenly here I am. Why am I here? Heidi tilted her head at me while blinking sleepily. I immediately shook her awake. How am I supposed to know that? Wake up already, I yelled, then deeply apologized to all the hard-eyed art craftsmen watching us. I'm sorry my sleep-deprived wife caused you trouble. Whether she had consciously come here or not, her goal had definitely been to find out the secret behind making ink not change colors when put on paper, but it was a major crime to steal trade secrets like that. I had to convince them that Heidi had just wandered over here sleepily with no hidden intention whatsoever. Quit messing around and tell the truth. She wouldn't just sleepwalk over to a place like this. If she weren't sleepwalking, she wouldn't be here at all. We have no business here. Obviously, she was here to steal the secrets to our paint production method. I'm a Lahara working in an ink workshop, and she's its successor. We don't need to know about paint. It has nothing to do with ink, and we both know how serious the punishments are for stealing trade secrets. We would never do that. While I was busy getting yelled at by a bunch of furious craftsmen, Heidi had started to fall asleep on my arm. Despite her own husband desperately apologizing for her blunder, her head started to bob. By the time she was audibly snoring, the craftsmen had all calmed down and were just shaking their heads and expressing their sympathy for what a crazy wife I had ended up with. Just keep a better eye on her, all right? Absolutely, it will never happen again. Heidi didn't wake up no matter how much I shook her, so I ended up carrying her to the workshop, at which point fourth bell rang. Noon had come with us making no progress whatsoever, despite the fact that Lady Mine always came in the afternoon. Can I actually survive as this woman's husband? I was so annoyed by Heidi's bizarre behavior that thoughts of divorce briefly flashed in my mind as I tossed her into bed. Don't drag us back down now that things are finally looking up. Their method for stopping paint from changing colors is a business secret. You know what we would do to anyone who tried stealing our ink production process, right? Sorry, she replied, scooting up in bed, and seemed that she now understood how bad the situation had been as well. You really weren't thinking, were you? I've been thinking so hard lately that it feels like my head is gonna burst. I'm not talking about research here, all right? I poked Heidi's puffed-out cheek, and she blinked her gray eyes several times in surprise. Huh? What else but research should I be thinking about right now? I need to stop this fast while she's still funding us. Heidi looked at me as if she couldn't believe that I didn't understand that, and honestly, I didn't feel like arguing. I had heard that Bierce and the Gilberta Company had come to an agreement about the research funding. It wasn't anything for Heidi to worry about. Really, what I needed to think about here was how to keep the patron from being reared out by Heidi and leaving. Heidi, Joseph, I figured out how to make fixing agents, Lady Mine exclaimed, walking into the workshop with a beaming smile that afternoon. She and Heidi squealed with excitement and immediately started talking about how to make the fixing agent used for dyeing cloth. Whoa, this is amazing, so amazing! Thanks to the fixing agent Lady Mine told us about and taught us to make, we stopped the colored ink from fading when used. It was done, and the burden was finally off of my shoulders. Lady Mine didn't need to visit our workshop anymore now that the ink was done, and Heidi could spend less time immersed in research. To be honest, having a patron visit our workshop basically every day was exhausting. I had to keep my eyes on Heidi at all times to make sure she didn't do anything rude, and Lady Mine's presence made it hard for all the other workers to go about doing their jobs as they normally would. I started relief, but Heidi slumped over in disappointment. We sure finished that in no time. Now that the ink is done, she's not going to be paying for the research anymore. Playtime's over, I said, poking her cheek. Please don't let her or anyone else cause any more problems, I begged on the inside. It was a simple wish, but not one of the gods were willing to grant. The Lady Mine smiled and said, I don't mind paying a bit more if you want to continue your research. Lady Mine, you're the best. Please, you're spoiling her, I yelled. Who's going to keep an eye on her while she does her research? I don't want to live like this for the rest of my life. Heidi, Joseph, as far as I'm concerned, you're both now Gutenbergs, Lady Mine said, on a smile pointing at Heidi, who was spinning in place with her arms spread out like an idiot. Guten, huh? We're a what? Gutenberg, the name of a heroic, nay, godlike being whose legendary accomplishments changed the history of books. As it stands, Johann is the Gutenberg of metal ladder types, Benno is the Gutenberg of plant paper, and Lutz is the Gutenberg of selling books. There's also Ingo, who helped make the printing press, and now you two are the Gutenbergs of making ink. It is only natural that I would find the Gutenbergs who are making my dreams of reading a reality. It looked like I was the only one who wasn't following her. The little boy accompanying Lady Mine had murmured something about there being another one, and Heidi was jumping for joy. We're Gutenbergs, Joseph. She has worked for us. She'll fund us. She'll let me do research. Yahoo! I'm sure that knowing why the ink changes color will prove useful in the future, so please keep up the good work. You can count on us, Heidi declared proudly. Ah, of course I get it. I've been trying not to think about it since she's our patron, but this little girl is a weirdo just like Heidi. Duh. I'm surprised you didn't figure that out sooner. That said, while them getting along so well wasn't good for my heart, Lady Mine already had her own personal workshop and the backing of the Gilberta Company despite her young age. She was on another level from Heidi in her singular obsession with research. However, your highest priority should be making the ink. If you don't finish an order before the due date, I'll cut off your funding without a second thought. Eek. You're the kind of person who loses sight of their surroundings when they get absorbed in their research. I need to make it clear that what your priorities should be, and lay out a punishment for when you fail to stay on track, she said to Heidi, looking confident and authoritative. Yep, that's a businesswoman for you. She looks young, but she's got a proper backbone. Birds of a feather sure know how to clip each other's wings, huh? Looks like you know exactly how to keep her under control. The apprentice from the Gilberta Company chuckled, saying exactly what I was thinking. Right, birds of a feather. I nearly burst out laughing myself, but Lady Mine glared at me with a pout, so I hurriedly promised to watch over Heidi's research to get her back in a good mood. And rest assured, Heidi was in a good mood that night. Isn't it all grand, Joseph? She's going to continue being my patron, and everything's just going so well. Heidi, seriously. I couldn't believe she was acting like all the problems she had caused this morning just didn't exist. Before I could say anything, Heidi beamed a smile so dazzling as the summer sun. Now you're definitely going to get your Burroughs certification, huh? That's what our workshop needs now more than ever, right? We finished the new colored ink and secured research funding from a patron, so if we force the issue with the Ink Guild, which owes us for dumping the position of guild head onto Dad, it should be pretty easy for us to get you a Burroughs certification, don't you think? My jaw dropped to the floor. I probably look pretty stupid right now, but could you blame me? I never would have expected to hear Heidi talk about the future of the workshop or anything like that. I wanted a Burroughs certification as soon as possible, but I hadn't at all considered that. This is why Heidi was so absorbed in her ink research. But you're the one who's researching the colored ink, Heidi. You deserve the certification. For each success, only one person could receive certification. Heidi deserved it. She was the one who had been so dedicated to her research that she was forgetting to eat and sleep. But when I said that, she opened her gray eyes wide and tilted her head. I couldn't have finished the ink this quickly without you, and you'll need the certification to run the workshop. Is this even more than something to discuss? You're not wrong, but I don't want to think about all this hard business stuff. I just want to mix a bunch of stuff and learn about ink. Take the Burroughs certification for my sake, Joseph. It's what your cute white wife wants, Heidi said with a grin. For some reason, confirming that she was cute felt like accepting defeat, so I silently tossed her into bed. Sometime later in the future, Bierce, as the head of the Ink Guild, awarded me my Burroughs certification. Ah! Leon, Sylvester Undercover. How many are in here? I had to look. Leon, we've got to go to the forest today, Lutz said, before racing back to his room as he could change. I went back to my own room to do the same. The two of us always went to the temple once the store was open, and we had finished dealing with the initial surge of customers. To think that the Gilberta Company's Lahara work would include going to the forest with orphans, I grumbled, pulling on the rags I usually wore to stop myself from sticking out when passing through the south gate. I came from a family of linen merchants. After my baptism, I became an apprentice at the Gilberta Company, then signed on as a laharl at the age of 10. The entire process was planned from the start by my parents, who wanted to strengthen their bonds with the Gilberta Company and its clothing business. In other words, I was working at the Gilberta Company to help boost my family's store. Incidentally, due to that mine girl bringing in weird work all the time, the Gilberta Company had ended up venturing outside its usual area of business to build a high-class eatery. Master Benno had told me to go to the temple to learn how to serve food from the attendants who served nobles there, which was the only reason I was going. That said, I was grateful that I was being trained by attendants who had experience serving nobles, since I did think it would be pretty useful for moving forward in life. But for some reason, I spent more time working in the workshop than training to be a waiter, and even now I was being made to take orphans to the forest. It didn't make any sense. Unlike Lutz, who was born poor, I had barely gone to the forest before this. I wouldn't have minded going there either if doing so would help my family. But chopping up wood, making paper, and printing books had nothing to do with our family business. In fact, it really wasn't merchant work at all. Making things was the job of a craftsman, while merchants were in the business of selling those things. So I really had no idea why I was being told to make products myself. I found it easier to accept going to the temple and helping mine when there was something due in it for me. She was an apprentice blue shrine maiden in the temple, and the one Fran served who was teaching me to serve. Teaching me to serve food. Master Benno had told me to treat mine like the daughter of a noble, but she was actually from the poor part of the city like Lutz. I knew that for sure, as I had seen her going in and out of the Gilberta Company in her normal raggedy clothes. I hadn't been told why or how an once impoverished girl had become an apprentice blue shrine maiden. What I did know, though, was that Master Benno had been pulling strings to maintain her new outward appearance. Mine had outfits suitable for wearing in the temple, but they were all used. None of them had been made to order. Her ceremonial robes were a bit different, but since they were made using cloth that Master Benno had given to the temple, she still hadn't paid for them, and she probably wouldn't buy any more in the future. Mine was a fake rich girl who would never be of any use to my family at all. Well, now you see why you didn't get the blessing, dude. You're an ass. Of course, I did think her inventions like the plant paper and hairpins made using thread were impressive, and they were definitely profitable for the Gilberta Company. Had I never gone to the temple, I would have viewed her from afar as a very impressive child prodigy. But she wasn't of any use to me, and it was annoying to watch her get so clingy with Lutz all the time, so I didn't really want to spend more time around her than I had to. Lutz was this weird guy who wanted to be a merchant even though he was the son of a carpenter. He had none of the common sense that other merchants should have. The way I saw it, he had only been able to become a Laharo because of his friendship with mine. That was the only way I could explain a failure of a merchant like him getting a Laharo contract before turning 10. To be fair, he was a hard worker just like Mark said he was. He had learned to read, write, and do math pretty quickly, and I knew he was doing his best to learn all sorts of work, but he was struggling to keep it all together, and it was hard to imagine he was really understanding it all on a deep level. 'Cause, isn't it strange? He's always like, I'll make what mine thinks up. Just apprentice merchants aren't supposed to be making things. They're supposed to be selling things, or spreading them around. Since Lutz loves to work in the workshop and take the kids to the forest, he's a lot more like a craftsman than he is a merchant. But, well, at least he's managing to do the workshop ledgers properly. Morning, Lutz. Good morning, Leon, mine said. There were a lot of people in front of the workshop dressed and ready to go to the forest, and standing in front of them all was a tiny figure in blue robes. It was rare for Sister Mine to visit the workshop without any warning, and if I remembered correctly, this was normally around the time she would be taught how to play the Harpspiel. Good morning, Sister Mine, I replied before quickly noticing that there was an imposing figure with an immense sense of presence among the orphans wearing tattered clothes. It was the blue priest Sylvester from yesterday, wearing the raggedy clothing that only poor people wore. His feet were planted firmly on the ground, and his arms were crossed. What the absolute heck is going on? I nearly let out a shriek upon seeing Lord Sylvester, the expensive bow on his back completely contrasting with his cheap clothing. I managed to hold it in by clamping a hand over my mouth, but my mind had gone blank. Lutz, I am really sorry about this, but I have to ask you to guide Sylvester to the forest. Leon, Gil, I ask that you both keep an eye on the children while they're gathering. Will everything be fine? What the heck, Mine? You really expect us to just go and take the Archduke to the Lower Cities forest? Yeah, how has he not... How has nobody else figured that out? I know Mine is slow, and that he kind of wasn't advertising it, but still. Lord Sylvester was, in fact, of Heronfest. I had been able to figure that out because after meeting him during his tour of the workshop, Master Benno had stayed up late into the night talking to Mark. Lord Sylvester apparently wanted Master Benno to massively expand the scope of the printing industry, and had been asked my thoughts on that as Laharo. Is she for real? Is she really expecting us to take him to the Lower Cities forest? Gil was enthusiastically nodding, and Lutz seemed pretty nonchalant about the whole situation. It made no sense. Had I been able to, I would have screamed they didn't know who they were dealing with here. Or, wait, do they actually not know who they're dealing with here? Do they not realize Lord Sylvester is the Archduke? No, they do not! Do you think they would be treating him this casually if they knew that? No, they do not. On second thought, Master Benno had been dragged out of the workshop the second it was clear he recognized Lord Sylvester, and since Lutz went back to his home at night, he hadn't been there for Master Benno and Mark's late-night discussion. Neither mine, Lutz, nor any of the orphans here knew that Lord Sylvester was the Archduke. Only I did. I wasn't sure whether or not I should reveal the truth. I opened my mouth to speak, but then quickly closed it again, deciding to leave it all to Lutz and walking away. Dealing with the orphans would be a lot safer than dealing with the Archduke disguised as a Blue Priest. Messing up a little with them wouldn't risk dramatically changing my whole future. The second Sylvester passed through the temple gates. He grimaced and looked around. So this is the lower city where commoners live, huh? Sure smells like crap down here. Literally, dude! He tossed it out the window. Looks like it, too. Aren't there any servants here to keep this place clean? I don't know how anyone can stand living here. Lutz, who had stepped out ahead a bit to guide Sylvester, turned his head back slightly and asked him who would hire servants to clean the city. It was a fair question since someone would have to pay those servants to keep the lower city clean. And as far as I knew, there was nobody eccentric enough to spend their own coin on such an endeavor. Who would hire them? Lord Sylvester asked. Yeah, the city doesn't belong to anyone, so... You fool, don't you know that the city belongs to the Archduke? I instinctively protested after hearing Lutz's casual reply. Telling the Archduke to his face that nobody owned his city was like asking to be killed, or worse. Oh, right. In that case, Brother Sylvester, please ask the Archduke to hire servants to clean the lower city. A lowly commoner like me would never be so brazen as to ask the Archduke himself. Oh my God, Lutz. Do you not realize who you're talking to? But blue priests are nobles, right? I'm sure you can do it, Lutz said with a smile. Honestly, I wanted to punch him in the back of the head. Lutz, you're being more brazen right now than anyone I've ever seen. And what can only be described as a miracle, Lord Sylvester didn't get mad at all. We just kept walking down the lower city road. Whew, there are so many colors here that my eyes are starting to tire out, Lord Sylvester said. That's understandable since the temple was pure white. The orphans reacted the same way when they walked through the lower city for the first time. Hey, Gil, or Fritz even, could you tell Sylvester about how to walk to the lower city? Let's ask. I don't really know how the temple works, so I'm not that familiar with what's different here. It was a wise move leading that to the orphans. Both Lutz and I were raised in the lower city, so we didn't know what would surprise Sylvester, or what he would need to be careful about. I'm pretty sure you're mine's attendant, right? Perfect. Teach me. Gil wore a tense expression as he explained as best he could, and all the while Fritz corrected his sloppy, polite language from the side. The adult gray priests in the group started to crowd around Sylvester, Lord Sylvester probably thinking they couldn't trust him to Gil, who couldn't even speak properly yet. The second I saw Lutz was furry, I grabbed him by his collar and pulled him over to me. Hey, Lutz, what are you going to give Brother Sylvester to eat in the forest? I whispered, and Lutz looked back at me like he hadn't really given it any thought. What's wrong with him eating the same stuff we have? He wants to see what the lower city's forest is like, so... Everything is wrong with it. You can't make the Archduke eat potato bowls and salty soup. When gathering and making paper in the forest, we would use the boiling water to steam potato bowls and then have them with butter for lunch. That and soup made from throwing some nearby vegetables into a pot of salted water, potentially with some dried meat if anyone had brought some. Plus, that soup was made in the same pot we used to boil bark. We couldn't give that to the Archduke. I'm going to go report this to Master Benno. You go on ahead. I pointed at the Alberta Company, which had just come into view, and separated from the orphan group to rush over to Mark, who had just walked a customer outside. He turned toward me, and his smile deepened when we made eye contact. Leon, shall we discuss this upstairs? It seemed that Mark had somehow managed to guess the true identity of the man wearing a silver hair-clasped leather shoes and a fancy bow, all of which starkly contrasted with his raggedy clothes and making him stick out more than he would have in normal clothes. I hurriedly climbed up the south side stairs. I started to explain as soon as I was on the second floor, reporting as briefly as possible that Lord Sylvester was sneaking out to go hunting with the orphans, that he was being guided by Lutz, and that he was about to be served the lunch of an impoverished commoner. I shall have Matilda prepare bread, ham, cheese, and drink. It might be wise to bring cutlery as well. Master Benno said that they eat the potato bowls with their bare hands outside. Apparently Master Benno had gone with Lutz in mind to the forest once before, and at the time had been forced to eat the potato bowls off of a board with his bare hands. Now that they were making soup at the orphanage's request, they brought wooden bowls and spoons with them and pouches on their hips, but Lord Sylvester had joined so suddenly that there probably wasn't any spare for him. It was hard to imagine that a noble who was going hunting and used to servants preparing everything for him that would think to bring his own cutlery. It was better to play it safe and prepare some of our own. Leon, I will trust serving Lord Sylvester to you. Please make the most of your training from Fran. Ah, and I see the food is ready. Mark handed me a lunch basket that had been prepared by the servant Matilda, wearing his usual smile as he did so. It seems that Lord Sylvester has no intention of informing mine or Lutz who he really is. Take good care not to slip up and reveal his secret. I took the prepared lunch and rushed to the forest. Work had already begun at the usual riverbank, and I could see bark boiling inside the pots. Some kids were washing potatofuls in the river, while others were gathering in the forest just like normal. The only note of concern was that Lutz and Sylvester were nowhere. It took even us Grey Priests a while to get wearing his usual smile as he did so. It seemed that Lord Sylvester were nowhere to be seen. Where are Lutz and Brother Sylvester? We split up once we got here, Fritz responded. They went off to the hunting grounds, and Lutz said they'd come back when fourth bell rang. I noticed he was stacking stones rather than watching over the pots like he usually did, and when I asked what he was doing, he said he was making a table for Lord Sylvester to eat on. I think Brother Sylvester will need it because he's a blue priest. It took even us Grey Priests a while to get used to eating without a table. It seemed that I wasn't the only one cradling my head over the fact that Lutz wasn't treating Lord Sylvester like a noble at all. The moment I realized that, I felt an odd sense of companionship with this guy. That's a good idea. I went and got some food for him to eat. No way could we make Brother Sylvester eat a lunch of nothing but potatofuls and soup, right? I held up the basket with my hand, and Fritz blinked in surprise. The blue priests were the ones who prepared the food offered as divine gifts to the temple, so I didn't consider for a second that we would need to prepare something for him to eat. Fritz had apparently considered himself a part of Lord Sylvester's group today, and had even expected some extra fancy food to be handed out to him. How are you expecting his food to be prepared when there are no chefs here? The wall of common sense separating me from the Grey Priest was just too enormous. Fourth bell rang, and I started preparing Lord Sylvester's lunch. He and Lutz came back, walking back having bagged 2 birds. Brother Sylvester, you can hang them from this branch. How should I do that? Lord Sylvester asked, looking at the branch Lutz had pointed out in confusion. But Lutz made no move to take the birds from Sylvester. Instead, he just explained what to do. You really think I have a random cord on me, Lutz? Well, I don't. Why didn't you bring any cord to the forest with you? You can't bleed them without it. Just what do you have in that pouch of yours anyway? Lutz asked, untying the cord wrapped around his own waist. I immediately ran over to where Lutz was and demanded to know why he wasn't taking care of the birds himself. I couldn't believe it. Not only was he making Lord Sylvester hold the birds, but he was expecting him to handle the preparations as well. I mean, he's the one who hunted them, so he has to take care of them. Making someone else prepare the meat you've caught is the same as giving it away. That's how things are in the lower city, not the temple. Brother Sylvester is here to hunt in the lower city, so what's wrong with him following lower city rules? Lutz asked, speaking as though what he was saying was obvious. Well, mine did tell me that I have to stick to the noble's forest if I wanted to hunt like a noble. Don't sweat it, I can do this. Lord Sylvester said with a grin as he began tying the birds to the branch. Brother Sylvester, keep an eye on them. Beasts might be attracted by the smell and try to steal them. Right. And by the way, Lutz, how do you wash your hands without attendants? I'm pretty sure commoners can't even use cleansing magic. Lord Sylvester said, looking down at his blood-stained hands. It was probably normal for attendants to bring him bowls of water. There's a river right next to us, isn't there? You can wash your hands in there. Ask the other kids how. I need to go look for some grass to use as more cords. I imagine you'll want to go hunting in the afternoon, too, after all. Lord Sylvester popped out his chest and said that of course he would, then turned around to look at everyone else. All right, kids, teach me how to wash my hands in that river. I can teach you, Brother Syl. Follow me. I learned from Lutz. I was real surprised when he washed his hands without even drawing water in a bucket first. The kids raced to the riverbed, and Lord Sylvester looking amused, dashed after them. I went ahead and grabbed Lutz's arm before he could leave to go hunt for grass. Hey, Lutz, what's that Syl nickname all about? Isn't that going a little too far? It should be fine. I mean, he's the one who suggested it in the first place. Lutz said with a shrug before explaining how the name Brother Syl came into existence. Let me finish what I'm doing. I'm almost done, and then I'll do it. Brother Sylvester is too hard for the really little ones to say, and each time they messed it up, the Grey Priest would all go white as sheets and have everyone kneel while begging for their rudeness to be forgiven. Huh? The third time this happened, a cart on the road almost hit one of the little ones kneeling at the back. Apparently Lutz had saved the kid from getting hit, and since Brother Sylvester was getting tired of the Grey Priest holding everything up to apologize, he told the children to start calling him Brother Syl. He's pretty kind and relaxed for a blue priest, don't you think? He's kind of a weird guy, but I'm glad he's not one of the violent, arrogant nobles I've heard about, Lutz said before turning around and heading off to the forest to search for grass. I served Lord Sylvester his food, and lunch came to a safe end. One person had a separate menu, and there was a table for them consisting solely of a board placed upon some stones. But Lutz didn't say anything about it, and Lord Sylvester seemed to accept it without a word. By the way, what do you all think about that mine girl? Lord Sylvester asked Lutz. You know her pretty well, don't you? Well, she knows all sort of weird things, but she has almost no common sense. She's so weak that she's almost always on the verge of death, and she can't do anything without help. But she's nice and she supports my dreams. Mine's the best friend I could ever have asked for, and I wouldn't be here today without her. Lutz was speaking in a polite, reserved tone, but it was clear he was speaking from the heart. Lord Sylvester tilted his head back, peering at the sky, and thought, what I've heard about her is a little different. They say she improved the orphanage, but how much of that is true? She and Ferdinand are saying things are way better now, but if that's true, she really should brag to the Archduke about it to get a reward. If she's lying, though, he might end up giving her a big punishment instead. The orphans were urged to tell the truth, and so they all started talking about what the orphanage had been like before mine came. They spoke about how she had saved them, how much food they got to eat now, how they could make soup on their own, and that they were able to spend all winter around a warm fire instead of running out of wood partway through. Their eyes were all shining, and anyone could tell how deep their respect and gratitude for mine really was. So she helped out the orphanage, huh? I had only started visiting the temple after the orphanage, the director's chambers, and the workshop had all been set up. So I hadn't known how miserable the orphanage used to be. And wow, I didn't know you guys were able to talk this much. What surprised me most of all was how talkative the Grey Priests were being as they recounted how far the orphanage had come. The younger kids would always talk pretty casually once outside the temple, but the old Grey Priests generally kept silent while working in the forest or in the workshop, speaking only when absolutely necessary. One could say that answering a Blue Priest's question was enough to be considered absolutely necessary to them. But still, they were talking way more than usual. And is it just me, or are they saying nothing but praise? Talk about her flaws, too, like how she's always clinging to Lutz, ignoring what people say, and getting people trouble with her weird ideas. There are loads. That was what I yelled on the inside, but when Lord Sylvester asked for my opinion, I had no choice but to evade the question by giving the generic, say-nothing answer of, I have not spent much with Sister Mine, and so do not know her very well. I wasn't sure what Master Benno would want me to say, and I knew for sure that listing off my problems with her would just make it awkward as heck for me in the workshop. I see. According to you guys, she's practically a saint, Lord Sylvester murmured, taking a necklace with a black stone out of the pocket on his hip. He looked at it carefully, falling into deep thought for a moment. Brother Sylvester, animals are going for your meat, Lutz shouted. What? Lord Sylvester slipped the necklace back into his pouch, drawing his bow and firing 3 arrows at the beasts. Each one hit its mark, and he immediately started running to the birds. The back of his right hand shone as he dashed across the forest floor, and all of a sudden he was holding a sword. That's my prey. The sword flashed, and that was alone to scare away the beast. I personally felt sheer terror at the sight of a noble's weapon, one a commoner could never wield, but the kids all cheered in excitement. You're amazing, Brother Syl, you're so strong, I know, right? Sylvester, perhaps enthused by the children's praise, kept on hunting in the afternoon. He shot birds high out of the sky while all the kids were watching, earning him more cheers and applause. We should be heading back soon. If we don't get back before the chefs leave, we won't be able to prepare the meat. I didn't expect you to catch this much. Lutz said worriedly while looking at all the game. It was common sense in the lower city to only hunt as much as you needed. Bringing home more than you could eat would just lead to it rotting on your shelves. Brother Sylvester's a Blue Priest, remember? He provides the orphanage with his divine gifts anyway. He can just give the meat to the orphans. By indirectly suggesting that they would get to eat the meat themselves, I was easily able to convince the Grey Priest to help carry it all back. Brother Sylvester gladly left them to it. All right, back to the temple we go, he declared in a visibly good mood. Right. We started preparing the meat as soon as we got back. Among the busily moving crowd, I noticed Lord Sylvester giving mine the necklace with the black stone. And the afterword. Okay, guys, I am done. Next part is going to be, I'm assuming, Volume 1, Part 3, which is Volume 8 in the series. And uncharted territory. Be ready, everybody.